This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A quick word. We've talked about care in corridors already this week, and another report today, a bombshell report, confirms what anybody paying attention, anybody who's worked in the NHS, or anybody honest in the media has known for the best part of a decade now. Subsequent Tory governments, 5 Tory governments, have brought the NHS to its knees. I'd remind you that patient satisfaction was the highest it has ever been in 2010. But if you've been tickling the toes of David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, then of course today you're going to pretend this is all a massive shock. What on earth is happening? I'm sure that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are to blame. Unfortunately, there's graphs and data that is easily accessible. Even if you struggle to operate Google, you could probably get someone to show you how. The British Medical Journal has detailed repeatedly the continued decline, the deliberate decline, many would argue, from a Noam Chomsky point of view. But there we are. Right, I don't know. Better late than never, lads. Is it better late than never? What's that you say? You've gone completely silent for 14 years. You've been tickling the toes of the people who did this, but now they've gone. You're going to express outrage and horror at what has been left behind. I don't know if that gets filed under better late than never or just deeply, deeply disingenuous and dangerously dishonest. Deeply, deeply disingenuous and dangerously dishonest. We turn our attention next to the Middle East. It has been reported already that 73 people in Gaza have been killed since the so-called ceasefire deal was announced. Ceasefire deal that demands Benjamin Netanyahu get the agreement of cabinet members who are clearly committed to the occupation of the Gaza Strip. One of them already, at least one of them, the defence minister, no less, already lives in an occupied territory, adjudged to be illegal. And I don't know why I'm saying adjudged. One of them already lives in an illegally occupied territory. So he's got people in his cabinet who dream of doing the same to Gaza. They've been increasingly open and bold about saying so publicly. So the difficulties of getting a ceasefire deal past them remain pretty big. And there it is, really. Another thing I thought about yesterday, and this might be a stupid question, but have you ever heard an interview with the parents, the mother of one of the children being held, often without charge, in Israeli jails? Sometimes it's the finer detail of what you read that jars the most, more perhaps than the headlines. So there'll be a lot of children released under this deal if it ever comes to fruition. I've never heard an interview with the mother of a child held without charge in Israeli jail. I've never really seen it reported on what kind of thing you might get locked up for without trial as a child in Israel. But there we are. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. I find myself looking. I'll tell you what it was. There was a line yesterday. I forget where it was. There was a line yesterday that we were reading. I read it to you and I paused. I stumbled over it because I thought it's unintentionally inaccurate. It talked about Palestinian people in northern Gaza, parts of northern Gaza, will be able to return to their homes. And I thought, well, no, they won't, will they? Because the footage that comes out of the strip, the footage that we can actually see, looks almost like a sort of moonscape. It looks almost like apocalyptic. It looks like there is nothing there. It looks like something out of Star Wars, except that they're happening now and in real life. Some of the pictures, I mean, there are obviously still buildings there. There are even, I think, 1 or 2 hospitals left. But what do people return to? Tent encampments have become commonplace. The idea, another line I think I should throw into the mix at this point. Antony Blinken, the outgoing US Secretary of State, and Joe Biden's administration, I don't think anybody could accuse of having made life difficult for the current Israeli administration. So Antony Blinken, the outgoing US Secretary of State, says Hamas has been able to recruit almost as many new fighters as Israel has killed during its ferocious offensive on the Gaza Strip. How many times have we sat here since October the 7th of 2023, how many times have we sat here since that atrocious, that terrorist atrocity undertaken by Hamas, and said that this response is going to make things worse historically? There's no earthly way you could destroy my home and not earn my eternal enmity. There's no earthly way you could kill my mum or kill my baby brother and not have an enemy for life. Such an odd logic that many supporters of, or unquestioning supporters of, the Israeli tactics deployed. We're going to eradicate Hamas. I don't think you are, mate, for the most obvious and simple of reasons, now confirmed in black and white by the outgoing US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. As the ceasefire teeters on the brink of completion, he has pointed out that Hamas have been able to recruit almost as many new fighters as Israel have managed to kill. The fighters contained within that 40,000 plus death toll. I sort of wonder who thought that would ever be an acceptable figure. But anyway, so what we are looking at is the question of what these Palestinian people, the ones lucky enough not to have been killed by Israel, what will they be returning to? When I read in the newspapers, when I read on the BBC that under the terms of the ceasefire deal, Palestinians will be able to return, what will they be returning to? I don't know. 10 minutes after 10 is the time. I don't know what they will be returning to. I would ordinarily rely upon international journalists. Well, no, that's not really true. Ordinarily, I'd rely on British journalists posted in the Gaza Strip, but there aren't any. Israel won't let them in. So what do we rely on? Who do you go to for your information? Al Jazeera have done some decent work on the ground. Some freelance journalists have. I forget the figure. Forgive me for this, because I should know. It should be burnt into my retina. I forget the precise figure of the number of journalists who've been killed by the IDF. It's staggering. I think if you compare it to other military engagements, if you compare it to other wars, it's an almost unique figure, proportionately speaking. But what do they get? What do these people return to? And I don't want to make light of, well, I don't think it would be possible for anyone to make light of any of this. But, you know, when we talk about the consequences of flooding, I'm looking at the fires in Los Angeles, and my thought turns to the aftermath. My thoughts turn to what actually happens. You find yourself thinking, because it's just about manageable and feasible that this could happen to you. But maybe not wildfires if you live in this country, because it's always bloody raining. But certainly floods, you know, and you sort of find yourself thinking, when you see people being flooded, you find yourself thinking, what actually happens? Where do you go? How many people have to sleep in the building that's sort of knee deep in muddy water downstairs? And we have had some incredible phone-ins, I think between 200 and 220 journalists now known to have been killed by the IDF. So that's another reason why it's very hard to know who you can ask the question. What are Palestinian people returning to? But I'm a bit different from proper journalists, if you like, because I can always ask you, and we know, don't we, that there's always people listening to this program who are incredibly well qualified to comment on every question I've ever asked. I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to say every question I could ever ask, but you've never let me down yet, and I know you won't let me down today. 12 minutes after 10 is the time. I don't know what they return to, but I do know that if it was a natural disaster, we'd have asked this question a little bit sooner. We did it, last month, was it? Talking about floods. I was hearing about all the American insurance companies that now won't insure homes in Los Angeles. And immediately my thoughts go to, what if that was me? What if your home burnt down and no one had insured it? That's like a wipeout on a scale that's almost impossible to contemplate, isn't it? So when I read that the ceasefire is please God, imminent. A little bit celebratory, some of the headlines this morning. I think having spoken to Noga Tarnopolsky in Jerusalem yesterday about Netanyahu's challenges from within his own cabinet, I didn't join in with the celebratory tone of some of the headlines, but always optimistic. You always have to be optimistic, don't you? But I did find myself thinking on that one line, Palestinian people will be able to return. What will they be returning to? Hit the numbers now and you will get through. What will they be returning to? Connor tells me, and I haven't double-checked this, that for context, a total of 69 journalists were killed in World War II and 63 in the Vietnam War. So I don't know what propaganda is being put out there to persuade people that killing journalists is absolutely fine, but you know that there will be some, which you can only do because there are no other journalists in there to tell you whether it's true or not. So I want to know what Palestinian people, displaced in their hundreds of thousands, living in tents now, in some cases for the best part of a year, told to move to one space because it would be safe, and then enduring attacks upon that space that they'd been told would be safe, so moving to another space, hospitals coming under repeated and sustained attack, all infrastructure in some parts of the Gaza Strip being destroyed. What happens next? And I don't mean this geopolitically or militarily. Okay, I think the obvious consequences of this war by Israel being the biggest recruiting campaign that Hamas could ever have imagined is going to be recorded by the history books as inarguable, as irrefutable. Those of us who've sat here with concern for everybody in that blighted part of the planet in the forefronts of our mind, a refusal from the very start to feel sadder about the death of a Palestinian than about the death of an Israeli, to feel angrier about the killing of a Muslim than about the killing of a Jew. A very rare perspective to be taken in the UK media, but we've managed to take it. And you look at what is going to happen next militarily, or what is going to happen next geopolitically, and you sort of think probably just rinse and repeat. So we're not going into that. We're going only into what the human reality will be for people who will be, quotes, allowed to go back home. Go back to what? Precisely. Go back to what exactly? How does this bit work? I don't know if you work in the field or if you've experienced similar, or if you have family. Maybe that'd be great. Maybe you can pick up the radio station in the actual Gaza Strip somehow. But what do you even begin to do when you're dealing with something like this? You are rebuilding everything. I remember, obviously I'm far too young to have been around in the Second World War, but when I was a kid in the 70s, sometimes big car parks would be bomb sites. The reason why there were big spaces in the middle of cities was because bombs had dropped there. But as far as I can tell in the Gaza Strip, it would be the opposite. There might be the occasional building standing up in the middle of a massive bomb site. What does it even mean? What does it even mean to say that these people can go back? Go back to what? 0345 6060 973. Isn't the word home an incredible syllable? Home. They're allowed to go back home, and it does mean something. That's why people are celebrating. Allowed to go back home. But when you start digging into what that actually means physically as opposed to emotionally, you are left in a state of almost complete confusion and or ignorance. I won't be doing much. I think Idiot's Corner is far too mild a phrase to use, but I'll read one because I want you to know what I deal with on a day like today. James, and this is from Sharon, who has signed this message Lucy for some reason, but her WhatsApp tells me her name is Sharon. Heaven forbid you should mention the October the 7th atrocities on thousands of innocent Israelis. So listen to the same thing you listened to. Heard me mention it, but thought she'd send a message claiming that I hadn't. But why so frightened of the question of what Palestinians will be returning to, Lucy / Sharon? Why? Why so desperate that nobody actually asks that question? Why so committed to the idea that you'd be able to silence a simple humanitarian question with lies and propaganda? Is it because it's always worked in the past? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but it won't work here. It won't work here. Never. What are these Palestinian people going back to? It's 10:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's an incredible photograph. I've seen it on a couple of newspapers, and it's a celebration, probably premature. In this case, in Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip, after news of the ceasefire broke, because in the first instance, you think, well, the bombs won't be dropping for a bit, albeit that Israel has managed to kill a significant number of people since the ceasefire was actually announced. But you cling to hope. If you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And you know what that means. You know what the bombs won't drop for a while. Maybe they'll stop forever. You celebrate that. And then if you've been displaced, you can celebrate on an emotional level the fact that you can now go home. But what are you going home to if you are a displaced Palestinian? Almost certainly grieving and bereaved. But what are you going home to? Aziz is in Ealing. Aziz, what would you like to say?
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Very welcome.
I'd like to say I don't think they'll be going back to northern Gaza. I think it's going to be impossible for them to go back. I think there won't be any infrastructure there. They won't allow any tents there. And I think they will, food will be flowing through at long last, but I don't think they'll allow it into northern Gaza. So I think, in theory, they can go back. But I think that there's nothing for them to stay there.
Why do you say this? Because, you know, devastation is often an upshot of war, and you then rebuild.
I don't think they'll allow any materials to come through to rebuild. I don't even think they'll allow food and water into northern Gaza. That's just what I think. The Israeli leadership has constantly said there's no hindrance to any supplies getting through, but we all know that wasn't the case.
Pictures of blockades. Again, you know, have they constantly said that there are no hindrances?
Well,
I'm not sure that I've heard them constantly say that there are no hindrances, but you know, that's not really the central point that you're making. The central point that you're making is that aid hasn't got through. We know that for a fact. We were talking to a plastic surgeon last week telling us that she's not even allowed to take some very, 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 very basic supplies into the Gaza Strip herself. So, I mean, cynicism and skepticism are par for the course in this space. But if the terms of the ceasefire deal dictate what can and can't be taken into Gaza, what aid, what materials, then I'd be a little bit reluctant to conclude that they're going to ride roughshod over that on day one.
Well, I mean, I think they'll allow supplies into Gaza, but not northern Gaza. I think, and
I need to ask why. What you think the motivation for that policy would be?
I think it's because they want to keep a buffer zone there, and I think also some of the far-right settlers have announced that they're going to settle there and set up makeshift camps to make it part of Greater Israel. And just to appease them, they'll say, look, it's just going to be a barren zone for now.
Yeah, and this, I mean, oddly, you've broken the only rule I'd laid down in the introduction, which is not talking about the broader ramifications, but that may have been naive of me. And you haven't answered the question of what people are going to be returning to directly. You've suggested they're not going to be able to return to whatever it is that we are positing the notion of them returning to. But this is so absent from so much coverage over here. The reasons behind what you've just described, it's not about appeasing fringe groups of religiously motivated settlers. It's about appeasing the fringe religiously motivated settlers in his own cabinet. That's a completely different equation and calculation from what's gone before. You can't get the ceasefire past Smotrich and Ben-Gvir because they're committed to what you've just described.
Yeah, I just feel lost. I'm celebrating the fact that, you know what, hopefully the bombs will stop and hopefully they'll be able to get food into them, the water. And to me, right now, that's just a big enough victory, just to be able to breathe, survive. Yeah,
to breathe, and then perhaps it starts again. And this is what Noga told us from Jerusalem yesterday, looking at some of the breaking news that was being reported mostly in Hebrew. In that Netanyahu was reportedly already promising people like Smotrich, that it would all start again. And also the torture of the hostage families that she described by, negotiating deals that didn't involve identifying who would get released or even knowing whether they were alive or dead. Thank you, Aziz. What will they be returning to? Dina is in Cheltenham. Dina, what would you like to say?
I think poor people of Gaza are going to return to complete devastation on an apocalyptic scale that we have marginally seen because, as we all know, international journalists have not been allowed into the territories to see how barbaric the IDF have behaved in their retaliation. But I also do think and history's proved it, that Palestinians are incredibly resilient people. They will be determined to rebuild and not concede any more land, as they've had to do for a number of years, decades, in the West Bank and elsewhere.
What does rebuilding mean? I mean...
Well, I think rebuilding starts from the top. The Palestinian people need to elect a new leader. Mahmoud Abbas is such a disappointment to so many Palestinians. And we need to elect a leader that is an articulate speaker of English, so that our international leaders include them in the discussion so that they are heard. And I think everyone will agree. We've heard Netanyahu speak, and a lot of international people can identify with him as a speaker of English, good command, and he can fight their corner. But who can actually name the Palestinian leader? Who has heard them in their own mother tongue? And I think it really does start from there. We need to
I'm thinking
show
of
the rest of the world.
I'm thinking of Volodymyr Zelensky, and his ability to communicate to the West is. I'm not drawing any other parallels between the two causes, but in the context of information delivery or appeals for help and support, you make a really powerful point. It's a bit chicken and egg, isn't it? I mean, the question of if the Palestinian Authority suddenly ended up with a leader who'd been to Harvard and was an absolute master at public speaking, would he be on our TV screens all the time? Or would we be hearing from him as often as we hear from in the UK media, supporters of the Israeli government, whatever they do and whatever rules they break and whatever death toll they, however many killings they commit? I don't know. But yeah, you make a point. But what do we do? I mean, in terms of what are they going back to? Are they going back to rubble? People who had a home. This is the bit about, we can get our heads around it in the context of the Los Angeles wildfires. And I make no apology for that outwardly odd parallel. I don't think we can get our head, partly because the cameras aren't there, as you say, and partly because it doesn't feel comparable. But you're going back to utter and complete destruction, albeit undertaken by fellow humans as opposed to natural disaster.
And they will return to those homes, be it rubble, and living in rubble for the next 6 months, year, 2 years. And proof is the Palestinians have been attacked on their own land, in their own gardens, in their own farms, in the West Bank, will die there. They will not concede any more land, as they shouldn't.
Thank you, Dina. It's coming up to 10:30. I think it was actually a bit daft. I was going to say naive, but that's too generous. It was a bit daft of me to seek to confine the conversation to the logistics and the human questions of what are Palestinian people returning to. Because as soon as you pull one of those threads, as both of my early callers have demonstrated, you unearth myriad other issues which are probably inextricable. But, I'll carry on asking that question. But it immediately opens the door to others, of which perhaps the most urgent or perhaps the most depressing would be the one about how on earth anybody ever bought into the idea that the total eradication of Hamas was achievable. And don't ask me about that. I'd ask Antony Blinken. It is the outgoing US Secretary of State who's explained that Hamas has been able to recruit almost as many new fighters as Israel killed during its ferocious offensive on the Gaza Strip. And, I mean, well, colour me shocked. Who didn't see that coming? I'll tell you who didn't see that coming. According to their public statements, every single person that's ever phoned this radio show in support of what Benjamin Netanyahu was doing in the Gaza Strip, every single one of them told me that it was absolutely achievable to eradicate Hamas. But here we are, 40-odd thousand Palestinians dead, 1,200 Israelis dead. And Hamas, as numerous, as populous as it was before it all started. It's probably too depressing to ask the question of what has been achieved, because I think we all know the answer is absolutely nothing, except the unnecessary deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians. And I'll leave you to answer the question of how many deaths would qualify as necessary. The reaction to, the revenge for the terrorist atrocity of October the 7th, I still think demanded action, but the point at which that action became unjustifiable, became unconscionable, is actually open to debate. One of the early people to call it, I think, was the, I'll get his name right in a minute, I don't want to misspeak in an area as sensitive and as important as this, but one of the earliest people to move on the question of at what point did the response become unreasonable, at which point did the response become unjust. It was in May of 2024 that Omer Bartov, a former soldier in the Israeli Defense Forces and a historian of genocide, wrote that it was no longer possible to deny that Israel was engaged in systematic war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocidal actions. And again, if you don't like those words, don't take it up with me, take it up with the former IDF soldier and historian of genocide. It's 10:32. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:35. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And the question of what... It's weird how many people, well, perhaps not weird, don't like this question. What will Palestinians be returning to? A few messages coming in saying, why aren't you asking a completely different question about a completely different issue? Why aren't you mentioning this? Why aren't you mentioning that? Well, why can't you answer this question? What are you so embarrassed about, ashamed of, frightened by? What will Palestinians be returning to? How can asking that question be offensive or problematic for anybody? Oh, I see. Because people might start feeling sorry for Palestinians. Is that the objection here? I don't know. I mean, you'll have to tell me. I can only read the messages that you send me complaining about the question that I'm asking. I can't really know for sure what might be motivating your discomfort about an incredibly simple humanitarian inquiry. What will these people be going back to? I suppose it might also be because it leads to next questions. And the next question is, can we really justify what's happened? You might think that question should have been asked sooner. And one of the reasons why it hasn't been asked sooner by many people might be because of the pressure that's put on them by the kind of messaging that comes in complaining about the questions that you're asking. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. But I'm asking the question, what are these people returning to? Do we even know for sure? And aid workers have been killed. Journalists have been killed. Huge numbers of civilians have been killed, a preponderance because of the demographics of children being killed. Absolutely extraordinary death toll figures. But the people who've survived somehow, celebrating ceasefire, albeit a little prematurely, told that they can go home, which carries an enormous emotional heft. What does it mean logistically? 10:37 is the time. 03456060973 is the number. Nuha is in Chigwell. Nuha, what would you like to say?
Thank you, James, for listening to me. This is the first time I call. I've been listening to you for years.
You're very welcome.
I am a retired eye surgeon. I've been in the UK for 50 years. I was in Dundee when the first Camp David agreement and Anwar Sadat was going down the aeroplane. I was crying with tears. And the only thing I felt at the time, thank God, I will not have an enemy to hate. Thank God this on my shoulders have been taken off, that weight, which I have been living with since I was a young girl.
Right.
And look where we are now. Look where are we now. Are we asking the wrong? You have the right to ask any question you want. It's good to ask. But the solution is really much deeper than that. All the people in Gaza are refugees from Palestine. They have been thrown out what they call envelope of Gaza. That's where their homes were. In Asqalan, in all that, that's where they belong. They were thrown out to Gaza. And now,
I know, and you know, and most people listening know that their ancestors or their forebears, their parents and grandparents were.
My grandfather.
I know.
Grandfather.
I'm just clarifying.
His land in Jaffa is now part of Ben Gurion Airport. His house is a school. So we have been thrown out. We are not asking for much, just liberty and freedom. And to live like every human being here. Get up in the morning, take your kids to school, and come back. That's all we're asking for. We are not asking for people to thrown in the sea or anything like that. But they are doing that to us.
Obviously, Hamas have a different perspective from yours.
No, they don't really. You hear them all the time, and I hear them. No,
okay. Well, I'm not going to argue with you about this. I mean, Hamas undertook the terrorist atrocity on October the 7th.
The atrocities has been happening for 78 years and more.
So what will Palestinian people, discovering today that they can go back to their, quotes, homes in Gaza, end quote?
There are no homes. There are no homes, only rubble. But they will put a tent and stay there until something happens. There is nowhere for them to go. I am a refugee wherever I go. Wherever position I have, I'm still a refugee. My roots have been thrown out, been taken from the land. We are 7 siblings, every one of us in one continent, different, in America, in Australia, here, in Hungary. We are in Brazil, in Venezuela, everywhere. We are scattered. We lost everything. So a house is nothing to us. A house is what? The bricks. But the land where you belong to. You can be anything. Here, I look at people here in the street, plumbers or whatever, and I think, thank God, you are happy because you have your land, you have your country. You are safe.
I don't want to argue with you again, but I don't know that many people are happy because they don't have much grasp of what it would be like not to have what you've just described.
Exactly,
we take so much for granted, and the diaspora, the refugee experience is almost
awful.
Impossible to grasp for people who haven't been through it. And I've relied often in the past upon Jewish people to explain to me the reality of what that rootlessness can feel like. Or rather, you have roots, but you are unable to
can I tell
nurture
you,
them.
Part of my family are Jews.
Yes,
part of my
that doesn't
family
surprise
are
me
Jews.
at all.
My niece in America, she's married to a Jewish doctor. With the blessing of all the family. We don't have a problem. My mom used to go, when she was in Jaffa, her mom used to tell her neighbors were Palestinian Jews to go and light the candles for them. And her friend, she called me Yusha, she used to go swim with him in the sea. What is that? What is that division? What are the humanities going to? Where are we going? Where are we going? I'm really full of despair all that.
Where do you think we're going?
We are going wherever people are deciding to do with us. I don't know. I lost all perspective.
Where are we all going? Where is the... Because this story here about the recruiting, the successful recruitment that Hamas has undertaken as a consequence of the killing, I mean, it just means we rinse and reset and nothing has changed except for...
You cannot reset that. You cannot... All the children are orphans. They're walking around in the streets. And some with no limbs. And so on. You have the whole population has been traumatized beyond means. Unless humanity wakes up. And unless in Israel the people wake up. This is not the road for them. This is not the route. The route is really coexistence, and that means acceptance.
And there are people, there are leaders on both sides that are clearly not committed to a two-state solution or to peaceful coexistence.
But every time somebody comes, look at what happened in Rabin. He was assassinated by whom? By Netanyahu.
Just to be clear, he wasn't assassinated by Netanyahu, but he was assassinated by an individual whose ideology is certainly allied to people who are now in Netanyahu's cabinet.
And these people who assassinate are not the thinkers; they are the doers. The people behind them are much stronger. They are not the people who get caught for doing whatever. They are not the ones who are, they are really just the doers. They are the means. They are the pawns. There are much deeper people behind that.
I'm glad you rang today, because I think we forget that. We forget that, don't we? We can talk about the terrorists, we can talk about the soldiers, we can talk about the politicians, the activists, the settlers, and the people holding the hostages, but the ordinary person who just wants to do what you described. Go on, sorry.
I talk to here people who are Jewish here, and we talk about it all the time. I say, you are not my enemy. Being a Jew is not my enemy. But denying my existence is the enemy. And that has to be, acceptance is the only way on all sides. But mainly, really, we have been pushed out from day one. Day one. Since I was born, I'm 78 now.
Yeah.
I'm older than the creation. I'm older. I'm older. I know, and I accept, because my mom's neighbors were Jewish and were her friends. For goodness sake.
For goodness sake.
Yes. What is that? What is happening now? People can't really wake up.
But where do you find hope? Do you find hope still?
No, I tell you what.
Go on.
I don't listen to the news.
No, I bet.
I really don't buy newspapers. I only watch now silly programs on the TV, and I look at the universe. Whatever silly is good to me.
To remind you how small we all are in the great scheme of things is the only way to hold on to your sort of equilibrium sometimes. I know exactly what you mean.
I look at this universe and say, we are so small. We are nothing. We are nothing. And we think we are a lot. We are not.
And yet,
we are not.
Well, thank you, Nuha. I'm sorry that.
Oh, thank you for listening. I'm sorry to carry on. It's just.
Don't apologise to me for carrying on. I've loved listening to you, but I'm sorry that this has brought all these emotions that you've been carefully avoiding by watching silly programs. Yes. I'm sorry I've brought them back to the surface this morning.
Yes, I've been avoiding. I even don't talk about it because it's too hurtful.
Yes, I understand. Well, I feel like that some mornings, and I don't have personal investment, familial investment in any of these issues. Thank you. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are having a conversation about what Palestinian people will be returning to. And I think we know, don't we? And perhaps the fact that we know is why so many people seem so keen to shut down conversations like this. The more you know about what Palestinian people are returning to, the harder it will become to justify what's been done to them, either in the short term or, as Nuha has suggested, in the long term. It's 10:47. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
James O'Brien on LBC.
50 is the time. A quick glance back at domestic politics. There is the memories of yesterday's PMQs. Something happened at PMQs that I thought was significant, but I wasn't, because we don't really have the pictures. We only really have the sound. I kind of wanted to double check whether it was actually true or not. And I think it was true. A journalist called Josh Self has who does a newsletter. It picked up on it, and it's more bad news for Kemi Badenoch, but it's also, as with most bad news for Kemi Badenoch, it's also hilarious. Did you spot it? How do I describe it if I want to tease you with it without giving you the reveal at this point in the programme? I'd say something that works really well when your team is on your side. Something that works really well when your team is on. You're not allowed to look it up. And then we'll have a little listen and see whether or not this fella's got it right. I would say he has, but partly because it tallies with my own analysis yesterday. 10:51 is the time. Excuse me. The question of what Palestinian people will be returning to could almost now segue into a question about why some people are so unhappy with this question. Imagine if after the October the 7th terror attack we hadn't gone into explicit detail about what had happened there. There's a very good article on National Public Radio about what has happened since, about the rebuilding efforts, about the reburials of many people, buried in haste and now properly interred. I do a lot of good work in this field actually on NPR in America, and the idea that someone had said, I don't want you to ask a question about what Hamas did on October this. I don't want to know what's happened to that kibbutz. I don't want to know what happened to those people. A lot of what we were told at the time, of course, turned out not to be true about what had happened on that day. But I don't think anybody even used that as a basis for suggesting that we shouldn't be trying to find out. We shouldn't be properly reporting it. Thank God journalists were allowed in. So why would people be so unhappy with the question about what Palestinian people will be returning to, the ones that haven't been killed in the course of this so-called war? 10:52 is the time. And on that question of double standards, this text reminds us that over 50 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire was announced. How would the media in this country be treating the murder of one Israeli by Hamas if that had happened since the ceasefire was announced? One Israeli citizen or Israeli soldier, I suppose. I don't know is the short answer to that question. I've got theories, but you can see why some people worry about imbalance, can't you? 10:53 is the time. Chris is in 5. Chris, what would you like to say?
Thanks very much for having us on, James.
Very welcome.
Your last caller, she was excellent. That was a wonderful, very poignant insight.
Don't hear enough, do we, from people who are humanitarian first and then whatever demographic denotation second. But there we are.
Yes. I think what they're going to return to in Gaza, whichever parts of Gaza they're allowed to return to, is exactly what we were told very soon after October the 7th that was going to happen. And I do forget which Israeli cabinet minister it was. It could have been Smotrich who said there will be nothing left. There will be no food, no fuel, no water. We've discussed this on your show before, you and some better callers than I, about exactly what would be left. We were told that. We have watched it happen. We know there's nothing left. The bakeries, the fact that months ago 80% of buildings in Gaza was destroyed. There's a report out 2 or 3 weeks ago suggesting that as much as 85% of the plant life in Gaza is destroyed. It's less important than the number of dead people, I think. But just as indicative of the words, catastrophic destruction, annihilation, I don't know often what the words are. It's entirely desperate. But we were told this. This was laid out, and the actions have followed the words from the beginning. But there will be nothing left. The hospitals are gone. The schools are gone. The infrastructure is gone. The bakeries, the water. Nothing will be allowed in. It will be uninhabitable. We were told it will be uninhabitable, and I'm very glad there's a ceasefire been announced. That's good.
Not quite, but we seem to be heading in that direction.
We seem to be. As for there being more deaths since this deal was announced, well, that's no surprise. If you announce it for 3 days' time, then that means you have 3 days in which to release as much ordnance as possible before you shouldn't do it anymore.
How much of this? Because you've reminded me that I haven't provided enough statistics, possibly in the course of this morning. 9 in 10 homes in the territory destroyed or damaged. These are the latest United Nations figures. As you mentioned, schools, hospitals, mosques, cemeteries, shops, offices, repeatedly hit. It's been suggested by some experts that we need a new war crime called domicide, because the large-scale destruction of homes and the infrastructure of daily life has been so intense. 80% of Gaza's territory was placed under evacuation orders that were still active in late December. So 80% of the territory you've been told to leave. Just shy of 2 million people displaced, 90% of the population. I wonder whether resistance to the question of what Gaza looks like now, people today uncomfortable with that question, is because the more of this detail, the more of this information that gets disseminated, the more impossible it becomes to offer up a single syllable of support for what Benjamin Netanyahu has done since that unidentifiable point when reaction, response, revenge, whatever word you prefer, morphed into whatever it is that we've seen since. I mentioned earlier the genocide historian and former member of the IDF who chose May 2024 to write that it was no longer possible to deny that Israel was engaged in systematic war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocidal actions. And that question of if the full story were known, the support, maybe not among governments, but among ordinary people, maybe even some journalists who should do more research, would leach away. Or is that naive, Chris?
I don't know if it's naive. The whole thing's so disgusting, and also we have complicity in it. So if you have to then think about what is there, what is left, what do people go back to, and you realise that through it all, our different governments have given very little aid in terms of ideas to the Palestinian people, but just Israel has the right, which of course it has the right to.
The pendulum has swung, hasn't it, on two-state solutions? But I think if you talk about complicity in confident tones, you'd point to the failure to push back on increasingly overt rejections of a two-state solution by the people who are supposed ostensibly to be our allies.
Allies is a useful word.
Well, it's useful for two reasons. I mean, terrorist is a useful word as well, and they deliver very, very different emotional messages, despite the fact that our allies often seek to justify their atrocities by reminding us of what the terrorists have done, when, the vocabulary suggests that we should be holding one to a much higher moral standard than the other. But that I do wonder. I mean, I do this for a living, and still reel at some of the simple statistical facts, some of the established statistical facts that have gone largely unreported on in this country. And there you have it. I mean, the deaths overnight, the killings overnight of Palestinians, and the question of how the British media would be responding to the killing perhaps of one Israeli civilian overnight since the ceasefire was announced. I hope we never know, because I hope no one gets killed in Israel. I hope no Israelis are killed. I also hope no Palestinians are killed. But one of those hopes feels a little bit vainer, doesn't it? A little bit more idealistic than the other. It's coming up to 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11 is the time. I think, did I ever officially abandon Brexit predictions? I ended with a 100% success rate, if I did. I meant to. I did, didn't I? I said I can't do it anymore. Now that it's actually happened, I could have predicted that Farage would try to disown it, despite having welcomed it and greased Boris Johnson's passage into Downing Street to deliver it. I could have predicted that it wouldn't do any of the things that but once that legislation was passed, thanks to the culling of any Conservative MP prepared to publicly tell the truth at the time by Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson. Once that bill got over the hill, I could have predicted that there would be checks on goods going into the island of Ireland, despite that footage of Boris Johnson swearing blind that there wouldn't be, with a glass in his hand, perhaps inevitably. I think it ended with the passing of the bill, when everyone was getting their party poppers out, and all the people who now say, we shouldn't be talking about Brexit, why are we still talking about Brexit? All of the people who were adamant that it was a great new dawn, a brilliant thing for Britain, and who now don't even want to hear the word mentioned. The only recorded event in British history where a glorious victory has been so amazing that none of the winners ever want to talk about it again. So I have given up on predictions, because predictions now are not 100% fact-based. So I knew, because of you and because of what you told me, exactly what would happen when we left the customs union and the single market. From the minute that Theresa May said that the 4 freedoms would all be abandoned in order to deliver the immigration ban to the racists. How did that work out for you, racists, by the way? The Brexiter promised that immigration would come down exponentially as a consequence of leaving the European Union. And I'm only talking to the racists. I'm not talking to all of the people who hate foreigners coming here but definitely aren't racist. You're all right. You can have a free pass today. But for all the racists who desperately wanted fewer foreigners coming here, how did that one work out for you? I didn't predict that. I didn't know that was going to happen. Nobody's perfect, but I predicted what would happen with regards to fees and tariffs and the rest of it, or at least customs checks, because I knew. Because all you needed to do was look at what other countries had to do in order to do business with the European Union. But we had this idea that they wouldn't treat us like other countries because fish and chips or something. Why won't they treat us like other countries? Well, rule Britannia. Rule Britannia. Green and pleasant land. Jerusalem. Why on earth would the biggest single market in the world treat a non-member called UK differently from a non-member called anything else under the sun? Literally under the sun or the moon. Well, you know, James, old school tie, British values. Fish. Why would the European Union treat a non-member any differently because it happened to be a former member than it would any other non-member on the planet? I'm waiting. You thought they would if you voted for it. Every single person who voted for it thought that we would somehow not be treated like every other non-member on the planet. Every single person thought there'd be dispensations, thought that there'd be special considerations. I could have persuaded myself sometimes that the unique status of being an ex-member would see a slight softening of the approach adopted to non-members, because I too used to feel a weird emotional thrill when I looked at 19th century maps where almost the entire world was red. But I'd have been wrong if I'd persuaded myself of that. And we talked in the last hour about things that don't get reported much or at all. But this is a moment of almost perfect symmetry. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, is due to deliver a speech today. She's in a fascinating situation at the moment of delivering loads and loads of speeches without ever really announcing any policies. All she ever does is blame other people for things that have happened as a consequence of 14 years of government inflicted upon the country by her own party, and indeed by governments in which she was a member of 2 or 3. It's always hard to keep up. There have been so many twists and turns in this field, haven't there? But she's going to deliver a speech today, and guess what she's going to do? And I genuinely didn't know when this was going to happen. I suggested to you, someone was kind enough to point out, otherwise I might even have missed the story, that it's very close to one of my last foolproof predictions about Brexit. When I was making all my Brexit based on understanding and knowledge, I predicted that a Tory could, well, that's not a prediction, is it? That's a speculation. A Tory leader could disown Brexit before Labour do. Such are the benefits of opposition. Such are the freedoms and the liberties of not actually having to do what you say or follow up on your words. But there'll be a speech later today where Kemi Badenoch blames Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, the moonlight, the sunshine, and even the boogie for all of the things that went wrong when the Conservative Party that she now leads was in charge. And one of the key things that she's going to label as a mistake is leaving the European Union, quotes, without a plan for growth. This will be, I think this is a moment, but I'm a bit Brexit obsessed. I am indeed James O'Brexit. I think this is almost worthy of a phone-in about the significance of the moment, as in how significant a moment is this? People have had an early look at the speech. Never 100% certain that what they've had an early look at will be what was actually delivered. But this will be a Conservative leader admitting that the chaos wrought on the UK and the damage to our economy caused by Brexit was a huge error. By coincidence, except, of course, what Kemi Badenoch is doing, and this does get qualified. This does get filed under James O'Brexit's Brexit predictions. What Kemi Badenoch is doing is the Farageist fraud of saying, oh, no, there is a good Brexit, but it goes to a different school. There's a great, great Brexit, wonderful Brexit, tickle my toes. Brexit is brilliant, but it goes to a different school. So you're still ignoring the evidence and explanations of people who actually know what they're talking about. So Kemi Badenoch today shifts from everything's going brilliantly, we should still be celebrating the abolition of the freedom of movement and all the rest of it, to Brexit has not gone well. It was a mistake, but there is a good Brexit. It goes to a different school. So Kemi Badenoch is saying you need a Brexit with a bonus plan for growth. You need a Brexit with a new shiny satchel. You need a Brexit that has different knobs. You know, if you go to IKEA and you buy a chest of drawers, but then you go to somewhere posh like Graham and Green and you buy some knobs and you put the Graham and Green knobs on the IKEA chest of drawers, is it still an IKEA chest of drawers, or is it an IKEA chest of drawers with a plan for growth? I don't know. But it's got knobs on. So there's a Brexit that goes to a different school and has knobs on. And that's the Brexit that Kemi Badenoch thinks. Not that she mentioned any of this at the time. Not that she's ever mentioned any of this before while cheerleading blithely for the Brexit that was actually delivered, the Brexit she actually voted for, the bill she presumably read, as I have. They all marched through the lobby in full support of Brexit. But I digress. Well, I don't digress, actually, because this is a moment. It's come a little bit earlier than I expected. Kemi Badenoch signing up for there is a good Brexit, but it goes to a different school. And the Brexit that Boris Johnson delivered was bad. She's also going to detail some of the mistakes of Theresa May and Rishi Sunak. Has anybody... Listen, I speak as someone who suffers from a slightly overinflated opinion of himself. I'm very glad you've never picked up on this. I hide it, I think, very effectively from you on the radio every day. But I do in private occasionally allow myself moments of arrogance and even conceit. But goodness me, has anyone ever loved themselves more than Kemi Badenoch loves herself? She's going to start going after Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, without apparently lacking the wit to realise that the first response everybody listening will have will be, hang on a minute, mate, they were on your team. You were there. You kept telling us how great they all were. So that's one element of the Brexit conversation that is going to happen today. The other is Ed Davey, who doesn't get anything like the attention that he probably deserves because he doesn't say... Well, he does daft things. He gets attention for doing daft things, but he doesn't get because he's just trying to get on with the business of saying sensible things. So you're never going to get much bookings in Brexit Britain if you're in the business of saying sensible things. He will criticise. Well, I don't care about criticising Badenoch. Everyone's doing that at the moment, especially the Conservatives. So he is going to urge Sir Keir Starmer to negotiate a UK-EU customs union to turbocharge the economy. This is obviously the right thing to do. But here you've got the two opposition leaders, the two main opposition leaders in the House of Commons, both effectively coming at Brexit. And of course, don't forget that all the biggest Brexit cheerleaders in my profession don't think we should be talking about it at all. A position of such epic ignorance that you could see it from the moon. How on earth are you going to achieve growth without improving our trading relations with the biggest market we have historically? Don't mention Brexit. How can you talk about why our trading relations with the biggest market we have are improvable without mentioning the reason why they were? What's the opposite of improve? Does improve have an opposite? I don't know. So Ed Davey is going to say we need to join the customs union. We need our own customs union. You can't actually join the customs union, without being a member. But you can enjoy the benefits of the customs union by joining something called the EEA. But if you join the EEA, the European Economic Area, then I think you have to sign up to all four freedoms: freedom of movement, freedom of goods, freedom of capital, and crucially, freedom of people. Kemi Badenoch, without realising it, such is her curse, is saying more or less the same thing, because she is saying we need a Brexit with a plan for growth. But a plan for growth would involve doing things to reduce the £15 billion cost to our trade of Brexit. Take the £15 billion cost out of the equation, And that's according to the latest OBR report. So you're just looking, I think, at a 12-month figure there. Or I could have got that wrong, forgive me. Take that out of the equation and growth would inevitably improve. You'd be doing a lot more trade because it wouldn't have been rendered much harder, and therefore you would have more growth. So what question are we going to ask? Because it all sounds a bit complicated. We're back in the territory, aren't we, of not quite knowing the difference between the single market, the customs union, and the European Economic Area. Ed Davey introduces a new equation into this one today by talking about a customs union between the UK and the EU, so a unique, bespoke customs union, which may be achievable. You could argue that Switzerland has one. So, except Switzerland, I think, is in the EEA, isn't it? Or it certainly abides by the four freedoms. And they're in constant negotiation, constant arguments with the EU. So worsening is the opposite of improve. It doesn't sound right, does it? Decline. I wanted a better word than that. You'd think improve would have like a more obvious, like exprove or deprove, but it doesn't have an obvious opposite. Anyway, I don't want to talk about any of that, which I probably should have got to a little bit earlier, given that it's 11:15, and technically I'm supposed to end my introduction at this point. As if. So here's the elephant in the room, right? Here is the elephant in the room. And it's interesting today that Badenoch has acknowledged it, albeit obliquely. And she says, there is a Brexit, but it goes to a different school. What does it look like? Well, it's a Brexit where we'd be able to trade more than we currently can. Yeah, but the reason why we are trading less than we previously did is literally because of Brexit. You see that, yeah. And Ed Davey, at least rooted in reality as opposed to in fantasy politics like Kemi Badenoch, Ed Davey is saying the same thing, but with a suggestion on what that would involve, because it would obviously involve undoing some of Brexit. So Badenoch's very close to that. So we needed a different Brexit, a Brexit that goes to a different school, a Brexit with knobs on, a Brexit with a growth plan. What's a growth plan? Well, it means more trade. How do you get more trade? Well, I can't say that yet. You undo some of the things that have hindered trade as a consequence of the Brexit that you thought was brilliant. Well, at least immigration went down, eh? And here's the elephant in the room. It's changed things. I told you many years ago, I've over-egged that slightly. It sounds like I'm about to tell you something fascinating. It's a really boring story, but you're used to that by now. Mrs. O'Brien ordered a lipstick online without realising, I think, that it was coming from an Australian company. Do you remember this? I'd be amazed if you did. Ordered a lipstick online that was coming from an Australian company, which meant that when it arrived here, I think we either had to go to the post office or had to pay on our doorstep. I forget the precise details. But she had to pay a fee that was greater than the cost of the original lipstick. And I mentioned this on air, and you told me that after Brexit, that would happen even if you'd ordered something from Germany or even if you'd ordered something from France. And I initially didn't believe you. But then the ghost of Michael Gove appeared on my shoulder and said, this country has had enough of experts. And I thought, hang on a minute, I should listen to some experts. So I listened to some experts, and I understood that in the event of leaving the customs union, we would exactly have to behave with goods coming here from Germany or France or Poland or Spain or anywhere in the European Union. We'd have exactly the same scenario with goods that were coming from countries with whom we didn't have trade deals. Albeit that we now have one with Australia, which was greeted, of course, on Australian breakfast television by the hysterical laughter of television presenters wondering what the hell the Brits got out of it while detailing what an astonishing deal it was for Australian beef farmers. But I digress. So we've not done this enough. We've done it a bit, but we've not done it enough. That you are in business, or you're just trying to send presents to your godchildren in Ireland. Don't know why I thought of that example. You never see in the UK media, in the Brexit supporting UK media, or even in the kind of battered anti-Brexit minority, you never see the stories about what it actually means. When Ed Davey says we need a UK-EU customs union, there are business people up and down the country going, hell yes, we absolutely do. But most of us, and I'm a little bit guilty of this, I'm less guilty than almost anybody else in the media, but I'm still a little bit guilty of it. we don't spend enough time talking about what it's actually done. Liam has seen the clip that I'm referring to. Somebody said, this is actually true. So one of the presenters on that Australian Breakfast TV clip said, what do they export for us? And one of the other presenters said, and I'm going to give you a warning now, accent warning. James is doing one of his accents. Be warned. So one of the Australian presenters said, I don't know, Spice Girls CDs? And I played this out on the show a few times, and I got a message saying, no, actually, James, EMI had their own CD pressing plant in Australia, so we wouldn't even be exporting Spice Girls CDs to Australia. But they were laughing at us because of the ludicrousness of the Australian deal. That's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is the differences that it's made to you, but chiefly perhaps to your business. So if you either import or export from the European Union or to the European Union, okay? What's it done? Badenoch and Ed Davey, the two major opposition leaders in the House of Commons, are now effectively saying we need a better Brexit. Whether a better Brexit is achievable or not, without admitting that Brexit was a stupid idea from beginning to end, is a question for the ages. Ed Davey would acknowledge that. Badenoch currently can't, but I still think there's a strong chance that she will. I still think there's a strong chance the Tories will disown Brexit before Labour do. But what has it done to you? Okay, 0345 6060 973. And I know you think it's a silly question because you think everybody knows, but I promise you they don't. I promise you they don't. You were previously in the business of exporting either large quantities of cheese or tiny quantities of homemade candlesticks. And you could send them to Berlin as easily as you could send them to Birmingham. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What has it done? When Ed Davey talks about the need for a new customs union between the UK and the EU, you say, hell yes. Because what is it that has happened to you that makes the case so clear, but which very, very, very rarely gets properly reported in this country? 0345 6060 973. And Tina's been in touch to give you just a little example, saying, since Brexit, I've stopped sending presents to my family and friends in Finland as everything gets stuck in customs, including bulky cards. I now order presents for them to be delivered from local shops in Finland. People don't know that. Most people don't have family in European countries. I sent a box to Ireland before Christmas and it came back to Ireland. Just a box. Nothing particularly exciting in it. Just sort of Christmas presents. And it came back. People don't understand this because no one ever asks this question. So I'm asking it now.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I sometimes wonder whether in my mind it's exaggerated. Things can't possibly be that bad. And that might be why we haven't done this phone-in anywhere near as much as we should have done. Listen to some of these, okay? So there's some that you might have been able to predict. This is from Joe. Hi, James. I ordered some lino for my bathroom from Etsy. Not their fault. It was just under £200. It was made in Germany. So when it arrived, I had to pay around £50 on top of the purchase and delivery costs. There's your Brexit tax. Joking aside, says Alan, my sister-in-law sent a knitted jumper to my daughter in Ireland from the UK. My daughter had to pay €40 when she collected it. That's the madness of Brexit. How many people are listening to this and going, no, that can't be right? In fact, let's divide ourselves into, you've got, no, that can't be right. James is spreading lies. This is all, remain, what do they call it? Project Fear. This is all nonsense, even though my inbox is now filling up with people telling very, very similar stories to these. Diana sent a Christmas present to a friend in Portugal. Last Christmas, it came back in June to me 6 months later. So you're either thinking, this is just not true. This is just lies. Or you're like me, and you're thinking, this can't be the new normal. This still, look, I know it's true, and I know it, but is it just, well, I'm just not quite ready to acknowledge how little I knew about what would happen in the event of leaving the customs union. And then you've got the other group of people who are the ones I want to ring me, going, well, there's no, because you could be like me, that it's happened to you, but you still can't quite believe it. Or you've got the group of people going, yeah, duh, hello, James, I told you, I drove things to Europe for a living, and I told you what would happen. I sent you pictures of the Swiss border. And yet here we are, still dealing with absolute harebrained, saying we shouldn't talk about Brexit on a day when the leader of the Liberal Democrats is saying we need to do it better, and the leader of the flipping Tories, the party of Brexit, Kemi Badenoch herself, the queen of the trade deals that aren't trade deals, is telling us that there is a great Brexit, but it goes to a different school. Jeffrey's in Hibbleston in Humberside. Jeffrey, what would you like to say?
Well, I would like to say that he absolutely completely ruined it. A good part of that.
Mate, I'm so sorry. Your phone line is atrocious, frankly. I'm going to endeavour to fix it. I'm not going to do anything. And then hopefully when it has been fixed by someone else, we'll come back to you immediately. But Sarah is in Derby. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
You well?
Very well, Sarah, actually. What's on your mind?
I run a micro business based in the UK, obviously. And
What's the definition of a micro business?
Just a really small business.
Oh, I know what micro means. Is there a threshold? Is there a point at which you become a small business?
I don't actually know
Okay,
in terms
checking.
of that, but I'm a sole trader. Yes. I do everything myself.
Yes.
I don't earn a great deal of money, but it's enough to put food on the table. So
okay, good.
I guess being a sole trader and doing everything myself sort of classes me as a micro.
Oh, fair enough. I hadn't heard the phrase before, but carry on anyway. Sorry for interrupting.
Anyway, I sell all over the world. I make handmade accessories and sell through my website. And since Brexit, I lost over 50% of my EU customers. And that was due to the increase in customs cost and also the amount of time that something might be stuck in customs. So you get different times of different countries, but it's not unusual for places like Italy, Germany, for an item to be stuck in customs for 2 months or more.
Yes.
And then I get it sent back. And then also on top of that, I don't know if you've heard of something called GPSR.
Go on.
General Product Safety Regulation.
I have, yes. And you have to fill that in, I think.
Yeah, we have to do that regardless of what we sell and what our size is. Now, it's all to do with safety, which is it's great. You know, it's aimed at the likes of Chinese products that are going into the EU that might not be safe. But it doesn't matter what size you are, you know, small business, micro business, we've got to abide by it. And we have to do it anyway, but now the difference is we have to pay for an EU representative. Now, if we were still in the EU...
Has that come in already? I know it was imminent last time we spoke about it, so you're doing that now?
Yeah, it came in on December the 13th, but most of us tiny businesses, we didn't know about it.
No, we did a phone-in on it, to be fair, telling people, warning, but then I forgot, sorry.
Yeah, there was just mass panic on social media because most of us didn't know about it. But because a lot of people sell several different types of products, they're having to pay several sort of fees
for each one, for each thing,
for each product.
So
now,
if you were not a micro business, this is why you mentioned being a sole trader. So because you're not on an hourly rate, are you?
No, not.
But what you are doing is more work than ever for less money.
Yeah.
That's a direct consequence of Brexit.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
Who speaks for you?
Well, there's a few trade organisations. I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Who speaks for you in public? Who is the Nigel Farage of people with real problems? Absolutely
no idea.
No, nor have I.
You tell me.
I don't know.
Lots of us wrote to our local MPs about this, but we all just got the same fluff, basically. You know, do this, do that.
And so there's quite a large online community, is there, of people swapping stories and tips and advice?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
That is so interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's an unexpected example of where social media is leaving traditional media in its wake. But, of course, traditional media can't go near this story because most of them, up to and including people on this radio station, told you that leaving the European Union would be a good idea and it would be good for your business.
Yeah, exactly, and it hasn't been. I mean, I've been able to gain that business back, or a lot of that business back, through US customers.
Good.
But it's taken a hell of a lot of work on my part.
And it wouldn't have had to be either or. of course.
Exactly.
You could have opened up the new market while keeping the old one and moved from being a micro business to being a very small business.
Yeah, exactly. And
then who knows, one day, if you played your cards right, you could be a small business owner.
Who the hell knows?
I don't know. This is it. Who knows?
I know.
Anyway, Nick says you need to get over Brexit. Nick's been in touch to say you need to get over Brexit. Yeah.
Does he? Well, you come and work with me for a day then, Nick. And,
well, I think possibly if he might enjoy your discomfort, because that's all he's got left now as a Brexit voter. He might just say, I'm glad you're suffering. I don't know. Is it Schadenfreude or is it just the hollow cries of a mega loser? It's 11:31. I could, for the record, there's a couple of phone lines free actually, but the texts coming in, I could paper the studio with them. Absolutely extraordinary how many people are affected by this. And I like the little stuff. Here you go. I left a pair of headphones at a venue in France in 2022. I'm a musician. They were my own headphones. I managed to get a colleague to post them to me. I had to pay an import tax on equipment that I already owned. Yeah. It is 11:32. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:35. As a Brexit voter, writes John, I agree that we were not told everything by the Leave campaign. Should have listened to the Remain campaign, pal. Actually, I take that back, John. The Remain campaign were rubbish. In fact, the Remain campaign was so rubbish, it's a miracle that they only lost by a relatively small margin. But anyway, here's a Brexit voter writing, my business exports to the EU and Ireland. The only way we could continue to keep our customers was to open an EU warehouse. So we're shortly to open one in the Republic of Ireland. Whilst we have lost business since Brexit, we believe in the future we might grow, or we expect to grow, as there aren't many competitors who can do this. So perhaps it will eventually be worthwhile. Well, for you maybe, but as you say yourself, John, not for your competitors that can't open a warehouse in Ireland. And of course, all the jobs and the tax created by you opening a warehouse in Ireland will be going to Ireland, mate, not to Brexit Britain. And I don't want to labour the point, but my goodness me, I should have asked this question before. There's silly little stuff like sending parcels, but it's annoying. And many people, if you haven't actually done it, won't know. And I wonder whether people to whom it has actually happened would be aware that it's a consequence of Brexit. This is from Sue. Imagine what the Daily Mail would do with this story if the problem hadn't been created in large part by the Daily Mail. Brexit has been a nightmare for our armed forces serving in Europe, James. My son is due to return to the UK in the summer after several years away. However, when he and his family return to the UK, everything on the Pantechnicon must now be itemised for HMRC. Imagine what the Daily Mail would do with a story about our troops being hit with red tape and costs as a consequence of Brexit if they hadn't sold you Brexit. Imagine what right-wing blowhards up and down the country would be doing with a story like that. They have nothing better than to polish their poppy and pretend they really care about the military. But there's a story about how we've actually scuppered ordinary working military personnel in a way that I was previously entirely unaware of. 11:37 is the time. Henry Riley has attended Ed Davey's speech. Henry Riley is, as you know, a presenter and a journalist on LBC and has to straddle that fence of being allowed opinions when he's doing one of those jobs and not being allowed any opinions when he's doing the other. So what did you make of Ed Davey's speech? What did he have to say, Henry?
He had a lot to say, James. Thank you very much. Good morning. The sort of main crux of the speech was to get in before Donald Trump's inauguration and to try and make some noise as the Liberal Democrats. Of course, Ed Davey sort of famous for his stunts, but actually showing today that he can do both. He can do the stunts, but also the serious political speeches. This is a man who used to be a trade minister in the coalition government, so very much using that expertise and saying that when it comes to President Trump, he quoted The Art of the Deal, President Trump's book, saying that you have to show strength when you're negotiating, and said that simply what Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader, and Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, are doing by going cap in hand, which is how he described it, to President Trump, begging him not to put tariffs on goods, is the wrong approach. He said it won't work and that Donald Trump responds to strength as opposed to weakness. And his argument is that we need to show Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, that we have other options. So he said, for instance, we need to forge closer ties with Canada, with India, but really honed in on the European Union and said that actually we need to rejoin the customs union, because if we do that, then we show Donald Trump that we have other options. And when it comes to the existing trade we do with the United States, actually, we make it very clear that the United States is not our only trading partner. Now, of course, critics do say that if you antagonise President Trump and you cozy up, they might say, to the European Union, then you risk Donald Trump retaliating and imposing even harsher tariffs on the UK. But it is definitely a shift, James. Back in the 2019 manifesto, they didn't mention the customs union, the Lib Dems. In the most recent election last year, they didn't mention the customs union. So when I got an opportunity to ask Sir Ed Davey, I asked him about why the change in policy.
Henry Riley.
Thank you very much. Henry Riley from LBC. Some Lib Dem members might say that the customs union wasn't mentioned in your 2024 manifesto. It wasn't mentioned in 2019. Why has it taken 5 years for you to say that you want to rejoin it?
We had many ideas in our manifesto in last July, which were about resetting the relationship with Europe, very concrete proposals. We were the only party, I think, who really had them, setting out how we would rebuild trust with our European colleagues. But you're right, the customs union wasn't in our manifesto. I'm glad you read that. And one of the reasons why I am making this new announcement of something that wasn't in our manifesto is actually because of the election of President Trump. And I think when the facts change so dramatically, when there is a threat of a trade war, where the incoming president threatens tariffs, then you have to review. And when you need to do a deal with someone who behaves like he does, you need to work out how you can get stronger. And that's why I'm announcing the customs union idea today.
So that's the explanation as to why it wasn't announced pre the election. But Ed Davey saying, being very forthright, knowing that Keir Starmer cannot be as such, saying that the US can no longer be relied upon to be a reliable partner. We can no longer rely on America as we have done in the past. And then finally, on the sort of meat of the policy, he said we should only give Donald Trump a state visit if he commits his support to Ukraine. So because we're looking at various positions.
Looking for leverage, really, things that you could actually use in the new universe that Donald Trump dominates. You would find things that constitute leverage that possibly wouldn't have constituted leverage with previous American presidents. That was really interesting. And of course, as you will know, Kemi Badenoch seems set to deliver a speech later today which will make similar points, but from a position of fantasy rather than reality in the context of what Brexit could and couldn't deliver. Can I ask a question early for Mystery Hour, Henry?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Why do so many journalists, when they're reporting back on press conferences that they've attended, include in their clip both the politician and then themselves saying their own name?
Right, I'll be totally honest with you.
Yeah?
A lot of TV journalists do it because it makes good TV for their packages. So you sort of have them on the screen saying, another journalist, I won't give them a plug, and then their outlet. Yeah. I sort of copied that, but I have been told in the past to say it because when they record it.
I love it. Yeah, it makes me feel proud of you. It makes me feel like a mother hen. It makes me feel, there he is. It's my boy Henry on the big stage. Ed Davey knows who he is. Say your name, man. Say your name. Say it loud. Say it proud. I'm Henry Riley.
You're right. A bit more confidence next time, actually. I really bellow it out.
That's what the listeners want as well, because they're watching your career develop as well with as much enjoyment and pride as we are. Thank you, Henry Riley, there, covering on. I should probably stop treating him like the sort of work experience boy now, shouldn't I? Given that he's producing the goods in so many ways on LBC, both on his own programme, of course, and on ours as well. This is mad. So from the sublime to the ridiculous, or the ridiculous to the sublime. No offence to Jerry, you're the ridiculous one. Hi James, Jerry here. I live in Denmark. I bought 3 tubes of Germaline from a web shop in Northern Ireland. They cost £1.40 each. When they arrived, I had to pay an extra £17 import duty on 3 tubs of Germaline. 3 tubes, not even tubs. I won't do that again. I don't know how the UK can export anything. And now to the sublime. This is from Norman, and it's lovely for 2 reasons. 1, because it's right on message, and 2, because, as you know, I'm a big fan fan of, well, you'll see. My wife is a composer-pianist. She sells vinyl records of her music globally. She has a small, successful business, but Brexit has added about 60% to the cost of a record sold into the EU. She also has to pay VAT in Ireland on all her sales too. The paperwork is also crippling. She has a small fan base in Japan. And amazingly, it is cheaper to export to those customers than it is to a customer in Europe. Finally, the last round of legislation means that she has to fill in forms confirming what the vinyl and the sleeves are made from. She loves what she does, but it has made it much harder to make a living. If you wanted to give her a shout out, her name is Alice Thompson, and she is a really talented pianist. Thank you, Norman. And this is happening everywhere, and yet it never gets talked about. Sam's in Saffron Walden. Sam, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. So I run a fulfillment warehouse. We're a 3PL, so we warehouse stock for brands and companies, and we link into their website and process all their orders. And so we've been hit a couple of ways with the whole Brexit. So everything we sell into Europe now, we have to include 3 pieces of information. We have to give it a description, we have to give it the HS tariff code, and we need to know the country of origin for everything we sell. And that will have to be put in on our software at the back end. So when it gets shipped, that information gets sent.
And it's from 0 to 60, right, in 10 seconds flat, because you literally had to do none of this. It hasn't been tweaked or altered or changed. It's gone from having to do nothing to having to do everything.
Yeah. And we have to do that for everything we sell. And the biggest winners, I think, from Brexit are the courier companies, mostly courier companies, not so much the postal network.
Sure.
Because they charge, every time they generate a VAT invoice, which is pretty much automatic and just, all done by computer, they're charging £14. So FedEx charge £14 just to create the customs invoice.
Because no one else can do it, essentially. And you're not big enough to do it in-house.
Because you're shipping with them, when it gets to customs, they either charge the VAT back to you or they charge the customer.
Can you put a number on what it's cost you? I'm going to cross live to the House of Commons, Sam, because David Lammy is making a speech on, I presume, on the Middle East.
I will update the House on the deal announced between Israel and Hamas. Last night, US President Biden and Qatari Prime Minister Al Thani confirmed that negotiators had reached an agreement. While we await political approval for the text, the agreement is expected to come into force shortly after midday, Israel time, on Sunday, the 19th of January. After months of despair, there is now hope. A glimmer of light in the darkness, a darkness that had seemed all-consuming since Hamas' barbaric attack on the 7th of October 2023. I'm sure the whole House remembers the agony as we learned the full horror of what had unfolded. The grief as we mourned those that were lost. For the hostage families, the agony has gone on and on. Members across the House will have met many of them, including the relatives of British citizen Emily Damari, and L.A. Sharabi, and Odeed Leshef, and Avatan Orr. And I know we have families with us here in the chamber today. I want to pay tribute once again to them for their bravery, humanity and commitment to bring the hostages home. And I invite the House to remember those murdered in captivity, included Nadav Popperwell and Yossi Sharabi. May their memories be a blessing. And I say to all those now waiting anxiously to see what this deal means for them, we are with you in the days and weeks ahead. Madam Deputy Speaker, in Gaza today, civilians will be waiting anxiously to see what this deal means for them. And I say to them too, we are with you as you begin to rebuild your lives. After 15 months of conflict, the level of suffering defies belief. Gazans have truly been trapped in hell on earth. Over 46,000 killed, so many children's lives extinguished, schools, hospitals and homes destroyed, hunger and disease, almost 2 million forced to flee their homes, with northern Gaza cut off from the rest of the Strip, a generation scarred by the savagery of war. Among the victims was Hind Rajib, a 5-year-old Palestinian girl killed alongside members of her family and the paramedics who came to rescue her. Among the victims were many journalists dedicated to documenting the horrors around them. Among the victims were aid workers dedicated to serving others, including British citizens John Chapman, James Henderson, and James Kirby. I invite the House to join me in remembering them all. We mourn every innocent victim of this appalling war. Beyond Israel and Gaza, this conflict has brought yet more tensions and conflict into the wider region. Unprecedented Iranian attacks, a renewed conflict in Lebanon, Houthi strikes in the Red Sea and into Israel. At times, too, our own communities, indeed this House, have been divided by this war. This, then, is a moment of hope for all of us, a moment to unite in support of this ceasefire. The agreement, as negotiated, Madam Deputy Speaker, has 3 stages. In the first 6-week phase, we expect both parties to stop fighting. 33 of the hostages will be freed: children, women, those over 50, and the wounded. Israel will start to redeploy to the edge of the Strip. Palestinians will return to what is left of their homes. The Rafah crossing will reopen. Israel will allow 600 truckloads of aid into Gaza each day. And on the 16th day, negotiations will begin on the detail of the second phase. In this second 6-week phase, the male hostages under 50 would be released. Israel would complete its withdrawal from Gaza, and there would be a permanent ceasefire. Finally, a third phase would see the return of the bodies of any remaining hostages and the lifting of economic restrictions on Gaza. As President Biden said, the elements of this deal were endorsed by the United Nations Security Council last May, but it has taken tireless efforts to reach agreement between both sides, with reports of final talks this week lasting an intense 96 hours. I congratulate all those who have contributed to getting to this stage. In particular, His Highness the Emir of Qatar, the Prime Minister Al Thani, Egyptian President Sisi and Foreign Minister al-Badati, President Biden and Secretary Blinken, as well, of course, as President-elect Trump. The UK has been supporting them throughout. From day one in office, the government has pressed at every stage for an immediate ceasefire, to free the hostages, get more aid into Gaza, and open up a path to a lasting peace. I visited Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories for the 3rd time as Foreign Secretary just this week, meeting Foreign Minister Saar, President Abbas, and hostage families to press for an end to this war and a plan for the future. We have also played a leading role in the humanitarian effort, restarting funding to UNRWA, funding field hospitals that have treated over 300,000 Gazas, and providing over 100 million in support to the Palestinians this financial year. I pay tribute too to the Foreign Office ministers in the last government for their work to deliver aid to Gaza. I know how hard they work now I'm in this role. And this intense effort must continue in the days and weeks ahead. Much remains to be done. It is critical that there is final approval of this agreement, and the Israeli cabinet meets. As the Israeli cabinet meets, I urge them to back this deal. Now is not the time for any backtracking. Both sides must implement each phase of the deal in full and on time. The history of this conflict is littered with missed opportunities. It would be a tragedy to let slip the chance before us. We must grab it with both hands, the chance not just for a ceasefire, but for a lasting peace. the chance to break the cycle of violence which has inflicted so much suffering on innocent people on both sides. The government is committed to sustaining momentum, however fragile the process at first may be. Every hostage must be released, as set out in the agreement. Every ounce of aid promised to Gaza must reach those in need. I'm sending my representative for humanitarian affairs to the region to work closely with aid agencies, the Israeli government and our partners to deliver on these promises. Palestinians must also be free to return to their homes, and crucially, they will need to rebuild. Rebuild their homes, rebuild their lives, rebuild their communities. They can't do this possibly on their own. They need to feel safe. They need the international community to deliver the funds that they will require. The UK has already begun to convene partners on the financing and coordination of recovery and reconstruction. It's essential that the coming surge of assistance is properly coordinated and with the access and security to get people all that they need. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Palestinian Authority has a crucial role to play. We want donors to support their plans for recovery, and I discussed this with President Abbas on Monday. We are providing technical and financial assistance to the PA, including to support the urgent recovery of basic services. Working with the Palestinian Authority and civil society will help lay the groundwork for an inclusive Palestinian governance in Gaza. This is the best way to re-establish local order and security, and it is therefore a crucial first step in achieving not only better lives for Palestinians, but a future for Gaza no longer under the control of Hamas. Ultimately, it will take time to rebuild Gaza and rebuild trust between the two sides. There are risks, I must warn the House, at every turn. But we must try to use this agreement to establish a credible pathway to a two-state solution. With equal measures of security, dignity and justice for Israelis and Palestinians alike. The decades-long conflict between Israelis and Palestinians cannot be managed. It must now be resolved. Madam Deputy Speaker, we're not yet there. There's much negotiating still to do. And as we debate in this House, fighting continues. This agreement awaits full political approval. The hostage families wait for those hostages to come home. Gazans wait for the horrors to be lifted. But we must still recognise the significance of this moment. It has been long awaited, frankly. It has taken far too long. And I sincerely hope it is now the basis for progress. Progress on bringing the hostages home. Progress on bringing relief, reconstruction, and hope to long-suffering civilians. Progress towards a two-state solution with Palestinians and Israelis living in peace and security. A better future for all. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Foreign Secretary Priti Patel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
11:57 is the time. It's a mark of Kemi Badenoch's leadership that the response to that, I thought, very measured and powerful statement from David Lammy will now be delivered by a politician who got sacked as International Development Secretary for holding secret meetings with Israeli politicians, including Benjamin Netanyahu and wealthy Israeli lobbyists, when Theresa May was Prime Minister. So the idea that she'll have anything to say that might be remotely balanced or insightful is, I'm afraid, for the birds. And speaking of Kemi Badenoch, do you remember the fella before her? Have a little listen to something he did at PMQs, which I've always found to be a very effective tactic. A very effective tactic in the sort of cut and thrust of parliamentary PMQs. Although I don't think this was at PMQs, was it? This was. But anyway, have a listen to some nice parliamentary tactics from Rishi Sunak.
Welfare spending out of control and a spree
of tax rises they promised the working people of this country they would not do. National insurance, up. Capital gains tax, up. Inheritance tax, up. Energy taxes, up. Business rates, up. First-time buyer stamp duty, up. Pensions tax, up. They have fiddled the figures.
And here is Kemi Badenoch having a go at the same thing yesterday.
We left him the fastest growing economy in the G7. In just 6 months, under his leadership, it's been taxes up, borrowing up, mortgage rates up, and that's not all. Business confidence is down, jobs are down, growth is down. Can the country afford 4 more years of his terrible judgments?
There's a bit where, what's his name, the deputy that no one had ever heard of? Alex Burghardt. If you watch it, and don't, just take my word for it, because no one should have that inflicted on them. He seems to be the only one who joined in for the first down, but he gave up. Fair play to Josh Self at the politics.co.uk site for spotting that. I thought that was happening, but he double-checked all the receipts. It's a bit like, you know, when you're at the theatre and everyone starts clapping along to the music, or don't, as the case may be. But even if you did start off clapping along to the music, if everyone else around you, no one else is clapping, and you just sort of... And that's our own team.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12. I'd forgotten it was Mystery Hour. I'm not even joking. I was just thinking, what we're going to do next? And then I suddenly thought, hang on, it's Thursday. Everyone relax. We'll do Mystery Hour. Which is a rather unprofessional way of introducing Mystery Hour this week. A weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. And I haven't bigged it up. I haven't even given you the vaguest reminder because I'd completely forgotten. So that means that you have now got for about the next... How long's the delay? 10 seconds. So you've got for about the next 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the outside, your best opportunity of getting through to the studio early in months. Because my usual queue of people jumping in as soon as I say it's coming up next is not there. So if you want to get up early, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I'll explain a little more after this. Tempted to throw in a question myself. What is it about Nigel Farage that billionaires find so attractive? It's a funny one, isn't it? But anyway, man of the people and gold bullion ambassador. The way it works is this. People ring in with questions. There you are. You see, I told you only had 30 seconds. And then people ring in with answers. If you have a mystery, a riddle, an enigma that needs solving, and so there are only really 2 things that you need. You need to be confident there must be an answer, and you must be clear that you don't know it yourself. It's up to me whether or not it's up to Eleanor, really, and Rebecca, whether or not the question is interesting enough to get on air. And historically, if it's about motoring, it won't be, okay? But there may be some exceptions. There may even be debates about whether a question is actually about motoring. What was last week's? It was about snowplows, wasn't it? Gritters, yeah, and petrol price changes on petrol station forecourts. And both of them turned out to be quite interesting questions. So happily, I didn't have to fire anybody. But I'm always prepared to, you know. I think that's it. You can win a Mystery Hour board game. I know some of you got one for Christmas, which is... I did mention Mystery Hour, did I, when I was talking to Henry Riley? I did. Yeah, how could... Well, anyway, I've told you. Swiss cheese, my brain these days. Anyway... You can win a Mystery Hour board. Can we check this is true? I haven't imagined this or dreamt it or forgotten it. You can win a Mystery Hour board game by being my favourite contributor of the week. That's it, really. The full terms and conditions for that competition are at lbc.co.uk. And if you want to buy a Mystery Hour board game, delivering joy into countless stockings this Christmas, then you can go to mysteryhour.co.uk. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the only heads up I'd give you is it's a little bit different to the other 14 hours of radio that we make together every week. Profoundly. In fact, it's a little bit different to the other however many hours there are in a week minus one that LBC broadcasts every week. I suppose the god of broadcasting that is Nick Abbott can sometimes delve into similarly silly realms, but never in identical ways to Mystery Hour. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Should we just crack on? Wait, hang on. Here's a question about the board game. Callum wants to know when the expansion pack is coming out. We were hoping to get it out before Christmas, but it didn't happen. It will come out this year. We're at the Kensington Olympia Games Fair later this month, and that'll be sort of the kind of thing that we discuss and decide on there. But I know a lot of you are waiting for the expansion pack. You can cheat, I suppose, and just memorise all the answers so that you never lose mystery hour. But more honest punters like Callum, very keen to get the expansion. It's definitely on, but when is yet to be decided. Jack's in Walsall to kick things off. Question or answer, Jack?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Thank you, Jack.
So my question is, how similar were prehistoric sort of Homo sapiens to us now?
What do you mean?
So if you took, say, a human being from tens of thousands of years ago and raised it today, would there be any discernible differences? Like, would they be able to speak like us? Would they be able to learn, walk, talk, all that kind of thing?
What makes you think there might be differences? If it's, I mean, I might be a bit stupid on this. You probably know more than I do. But if it's Homo sapiens, are we not genetically identical?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, are we genetically identical, but are there certain things that we've adapted to do over time?
If we found a frozen Homo sapiens from when do we reckon they were first?
Ooh, I'm not sure.
About 300,000 years ago?
Let's go 300,000.
Quarter of a million years ago.
Yeah,
give or take. If we found the frozen, have you ever seen California Man, starring Pauly Shore?
I have not.
You're not an intellectual, Jack, clearly. It's a very good film, very good historical documentary. If you found the frozen man or woman from 250,000 years ago, would they be indistinguishable from you and me?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Right, are they indistinguishable?
Yeah, all right. I quite like that question. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need if you know the answer. Daniel is in Welwyn Garden City. Daniel, question or answer?
Question, James. Happy New Year.
Thank you. It's a bit late for that, mate, but it's the thought that counts. Happy New Year to you too. I've had a birthday since then.
Oh, and happy birthday as well, then.
Thank you very much. Carry on with your question.
Happy Christmas.
Go on.
I got a new shirt for Christmas.
Oh, yes.
It's blue and white striped, and the stripes are quite fine.
Yes.
And I washed it, and I found that when I ironed it, if I moved it too quickly on the ironing board, the pattern hurt my eyes.
Yes.
Why is that?
I'm familiar with this. Well, I think I know why this is. I don't know. Well, shall I stop with the red button commentary and try and answer your question? I think is it why I can't wear shirts like that on telly? Like I'm ever on telly these days. What we call it is strobing. We used to call it strobing. So if you turn up at a TV studio, you have to take a variety of shirts with you, and the floor manager will hold them up in front of the camera, and some of them will have patterns on that strobe. So it almost is like the lines and the patterns are moving when obviously they're not. Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And is it just the moving that gives me a headache, or?
No, I don't know why it's happening to your naked eye, because the lens would be processing the information at a different speed from the naked eye. But for the naked eye, I presume it's linked to strobing. But I've not heard of it with the naked eye before. I'll put it on. I like it.
Cool.
No, I don't. Is it a nice shirt? Do you like the shirt?
Yeah, it's okay.
Only okay.
I've only worn it once, and I don't know if I'll be able to wear it again because I haven't been able to iron it yet.
Well, it's that bad. It's actually debilitating.
Well, it makes me look away. I have to look away.
So, what do you feel? A bit giddy, a bit like dizzy,
headachy. But it doesn't last very long. It's not a long-term thing. It's just I can't... And it's only when, you iron a bit and then you pull it around a bit more. It's only when I'm moving it.
Okay, no, you're on. Yeah, I think it'll be some version of strobing, but I don't know for sure, so I'll put it on the board. And before my inbox is full of television producers inviting me onto their programmes, I'm going to make absolutely clear it's entirely through my choice. You'll never guess what reality show I turned down just before Christmas. And I don't think I'm allowed to tell you, actually, but that's the closest I've come in a very long time to actually saying yes to one of these requests. But anyway, that's about shirts. 12:12 is the time. Phil's in Beckenham. Phil, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Phil.
It's about the Karakoram Highway, which
Right.
runs between China and Pakistan, and
Yeah, of course
it runs through the mountains. It's a huge building project that took about 25 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a 2-lane highway, not even a dual carriageway.
Yeah.
When they get to the border of China and Pakistan,
Oh, Phil, the phone line's gone, mate. I can't believe it. It might be the Chinese authorities unhappy with the idea of you questioning some of their decision-making. I'm joking. Jackie's in Greenhampton in North Yorkshire. I don't know Greenhampton. Where's that near, Jackie?
So it's a very small village, exactly 9 miles between Harrogate and York, bang centre in the middle of the two. Yeah.
Okay. That's why I haven't heard of it, because it's so tiny,
Yeah,
I imagine.
it's tiny, yeah.
Question or answer?
So it's a question, please.
Carry on.
So it's about worms. So where I live is very rural.
Yes.
And every time it rains, I go out for a walk, and it's like Wormageddon.
Yes.
There are worms all over the footpaths.
I think there was a video game called Wormageddon when I was a kid.
Is there?
I could have
Okay.
imagined it. So carry on.
So what I was trying to understand is, why do they do that? Because they live under the ground, so clearly they can breathe under the ground.
Yeah.
So why are they coming out with it rains? Is it something to do with the fact that they might drown?
You don't.
But then I don't know if worms have lungs.
You don't.
So
You
yeah.
don't have to wait. You can fake the rain. You know.
Yes, you can tap, can't you?
That's right. Yeah,
I think-
fishermen
yeah.
do it. I did it when I used to go fishing. You can make your own worms appear by faking rain and tapping the ground. I used to know this. I think this came up years ago on Mystery. And I think it might be what you said. It might be something to do with respiration. Or hang on. How about this one, Jackie? Try this one on for size. You don't really see birds flying around in the rain, do you?
No.
So what predates on worms?
Well, obviously birds. But then again, when you come out in the morning and there's worms all over the pavements, you don't see worms picking them off. You don't see birds picking them off, sorry.
They're probably full. They've already eaten before you got out. They've already
Possibly. I mean, I'll give you that,
But if
James,
you were a
know
worm,
more than me.
if you were a worm and you'd learnt, evolution had delivered you to a place where you knew that birds will eat you if you poke your head above ground, and then you'd worked out that noise above ground means there's no birds around, you'd come and have a little look around, wouldn't you? Maybe they do need
No, but they haven't got. I didn't think they had eyes.
All right, not a look around, literally. The ones. Okay. You're quite a tricky customer, Jackie. I normally make these glib and throwaway comments without expecting any pushback or challenge.
No, I know. You see, I've listened to you for a very long time. So
You've got my number.
I know how you operate.
Got my number. I'll find out for you. Why do the worms come out when it rains? I like it. It's a lovely question. Thank you, Jackie. Worms, 12:15 is the time. And if you remember, don't phone in to complain. Just grab the phone lines when they're freed up. And as soon as I say goodbye to Jackie, 03456060973 is the number you need to get that phone line.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 is the time. If we found a frozen Homo sapiens from 250,000 years ago and defrosted him, and he miraculously survived, please don't question the science. This is Mystery Hour. Would he be exactly the same? Would he be indistinguishable from a modern human? Why does Daniel's stripy shirt make him feel ill while he's ironing it? Well, interesting. It might be the type of light someone has suggested on that one. And why do worms come out when it's raining? And that's not just in Greenhampton. I think we can all attest that is a global truth. Let's go back to Phil in Beckenham, because he was introducing us to the Karakoram Highway, which runs from China to Pakistan, of course, and was about to ask a question, which I think we can safely agree is not a motoring question, even though it involves a road. I think we can, but it depends on exactly what the question is, Phil.
Well, strictly speaking, unfortunately, I didn't think about that. It is a motoring question, but only in as much as there's a physical aspect to it. In China, they drive on the right, and in Pakistan, they drive on the left.
Yeah.
It's a 2-lane highway, not a dual carriageway.
I think, and this is why I don't like motoring questions, Phil. Because do you know what I have to do now?
What? Go on.
I have to point out that the terminology dual carriageway actually has nothing to do with the number of lanes.
Well, no, I realise that, but all I'm just trying to paint the picture is just a single road with 2 lanes.
All right.
The dual carriageway bit, I suppose, is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's basically...
That's what happens with motoring questions. Irrelevant stuff happens.
Oh, all right, but it's basically a small
All
road.
it is, a dual carriageway is a road... Why are you making me do this, Phil?
Well, no, don't you? Just
No, I have to do it, don't I? It's my programme. I can't let the bloody facts go on. So I need to remind everyone what a dual carriageway is now. So you start off with a question about a fascinating highway running from China to Pakistan with a border somewhere in the mountains. And now I have to tell people, because you've asked a motoring question, that technically a dual carriageway is a road with a physical barrier that separates traffic travelling in opposite directions. So the number of lanes is irrelevant to the dual carriageway definition, Phil.
I was simply trying to paint the picture.
I know. It's not your fault. You didn't put yourself through. Carry on, Phil.
Right. So my question is...
Yes.
I've looked at pictures of it on Google Earth. There is no apparent provision for traffic to change sides on the road.
So at some point, we believe, what mountain range would that be between China and Pakistan? Have we got any
Probably
idea?
the eastern end of the Himalayas. I'm not entirely sure.
At some point on the eastern end of the Himalayas, a road crosses a land border between China and Pakistan, and the rules over which side of the road you drive on change.
Precisely.
There'll be a roundabout a couple of miles up on one side or the other, and they go in it one way and come off it the other or something like that. There's another place where this happens, and they've got like a mad bridge. Have you seen it?
Oh, yes, I have.
Thought, when you said you'd been looking at the Karakoram Highway on Google Earth, I had a feeling you might have seen this bridge, Phil. I thought, here's a man with a hobby. And so where is that bridge? That's China as well, is it? I forget. Where they drive in one end and they do this weird thing that means they drive out on the other side of the road from the one they drove in on. But anyway, I digress. You want to know about the Karakoram Highway, what happens when Chinese traffic meets Pakistani traffic on the same road, despite the fact that they drive on different sides of it?
Precisely.
It's a good question, Phil.
Good, I'm glad you like it.
No, it is a good question, Phil.
Sorry about the other bit.
Well, if you hadn't brought dual carriageways into it, we'd have been golden, mate.
I do want to ask you one other very quick thing.
Go on, then.
When you came back from holiday, I was half asleep when I was listening to you.
Fair enough. It's a common condition, Phil. It's a common condition.
Well, it was at the start of the programme.
Yes.
You said, I thought I heard you say that you'd been on holiday in Italy near the Turkish border.
Yeah.
But Italy doesn't border Turkey.
It's possible you're telling the wrong presenter that, Phil.
No, I'm sure you... Oh.
Did you not hear my holiday? Well, obviously not. A man of taste and discretion managed to avoid Suella Braverman on LBC. But when Suella Braverman was covering for me over Christmas, she claimed that not only was there a wall that had been built on the border between Italy and Turkey, but she also claimed that she knew this, Phil, because she'd actually been there and seen it.
That explains it, because I didn't know about... God, she was terrible on your programme. She was absolutely beyond the pale.
Well, you surprised me.
In fact, she wasn't as good as that.
Well, she's back soon, probably. Anyway, so that's what I knew that joke would go over quite a lot ahead. So I'm actually quite glad you've given me the opportunity to clarify it, Phil.
No, I'm glad you explained it, because I had been wondering about it. I even had a quick look at the map to check.
I wish she had. Actually, no, I'm delighted that she didn't. Lovely stuff. Thank you, Phil. I've got to get you an answer now. The Karakoram Highway, it's all going on today. 23 minutes after 12 is the time. Lisa is in Cardiff. Lisa, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on.
So can I firstly say it's lovely to talk to you. Oh. My daughter and I listen to your catch-up every week. She loves Mystery Hour. She's only 10, so she's going to be utterly thrilled that I've managed to get on
What's her name?
Freya.
Hi, Freya. Thank you for. I hope you are actually enjoying it, and you're not just being forced to listen to this gibberish by your mother.
to listen to it. She loves listening to you.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Thank you,
So,
Freya.
my
as well.
question is...
question from Lisa. Freya's mum, as she's better known.
Freya's mum, absolutely. So when you get one of those really small spots on your face, one of those little whiteheads, some people call them, or pimples, why are they so painful? I'm not talking about the acne type spots that can be quite inflamed and sort of almost like cysts. Just the real small little whitehead spots. Why are they so blinking painful?
It's a while since I've had one.
Well, I'm in my early 40s, and unfortunately, I still get the odd one. Yeah.
I don't know what I don't know that I can remember. I'm just going to have a quick consultation. We recognise this physical phenomenon, do we? Keith? Do you recognise this mode of zit? Like a really tiny little one that's more painful than any other kind? We do recognise this, do we? I don't know is the short answer. I'll try and find out for you, Lisa. It's a tricky one, though, isn't it? What's Freya going to think about her mum ringing in to Mystery Hour to talk about her spots?
Well, I don't know. I'm just hoping she's going to be thrilled. No, she'll be thrilled that I got through.
Well, let's make sure we get an answer for Freya, at least, and for Lisa, of course. So why are those tiny, tiny little spots more painful than their bigger cousins? 0345 60 973. Chrissy says, thank goodness, I was exactly the same about the Turkish border. I thought it's not like James to get something like that wrong. I thought it was better not to explain the joke. I think, because then imagine if you had got it, and you'd know that there were loads of people out there who hadn't got it. You get that special sense of, go us. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Jemima is in Hyde Barnet. Jemima, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
I'd like to know where the phrase "how about them apples" comes from.
How do you like them apples, I think, isn't it? Or how about them apples?
Either I'd be interested in.
I don't know why I've got hand grenades in my mind. I could have imagined this, Jemima. I could have dreamt it, but I think imagine if I threw a hand grenade at you.
Yeah.
Which looks a bit like, I think I'm making this up. Am I making this up? And
so it's like a war reference.
Yeah, and it looked a bit like a hand grenade. And I threw it at you, and then I shouted, "How'd you like them apples?" just before it blew you up.
Okay, so that would explain why it's a statement of triumph, I guess.
Yeah. But I've got no idea if that's where it really comes from. Is it not? Does it come up in Good Will Hunting, in the film Good Will Hunting? Have you seen Good Will Hunting?
Yes, possibly, yeah. I know because my university professor always used to say it.
How'd you
and
like
I
them
never
apples?
understood why he said it.
I'm not going to give myself a round of applause for that in case it is quite catastrophically wrong. But if we don't get an answer, that's the one that I'd use moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you, Jemima. How do you like them apples? 26 minutes after 12 is the time. Matt's in Worthing. Matt, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question, please.
Carry on, Matt.
And I don't often get a chance to ring you because I'm usually working, but I'm off ill today.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What's up? What seems to be the problem?
I've got this white pimple on my nose, and I'm trying to pop it. No. I've got like flu.
Got the lurgy. So has Sheila Fogarty, actually. So Matt Fry will be standing in for her. God, that was professional. Just let's take a moment, Matt, to respect each other's professionalism. You come on randomly, mention lurgy. I use it half an hour before handover as an opportunity to mention that Sheila Fogarty is also off poorly today and will therefore be replaced by Matt Fry. How about that? It's almost like I'm a professional presenter.
You're nothing if not professional, James.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you. What's your question?
So the question is cats. You get these stories coming up that cats are lost a long way from home, and they manage to somehow get home. They traverse 800, 900 miles. These ridiculous distances, and find their way home.
Yes.
How on earth can a cat do that? Somebody needs to look into it.
It's a very good question. And so, we have the opposite example as well, where you lose a cat and you never see it again, and no one's taking it anywhere.
Down the end of the garden, but yeah, it's there's one recently. A family went camping in an American national park. I don't know why you would take your cat camping, but maybe it's just like
we probably had a massive SUV, did they?
I would have thought so. Yeah. Something like that.
You take a cat in a massive SUV. I'd probably take a cat in a massive SUV. Some cats are very, very domesticated, aren't they? And some like to go for right old wonders.
Yeah. Absolutely. Some you can't even let out the house,
You're
can
not
you?
wrong.
'Cause
No, this is exactly right.
Yeah.
So they went on a big holiday to a national park. The cat got away. They drove home, and a few months later, the cat turned up.
Yeah, it turns out, with a suitcase with loads of stickers on it from all these different places.
Little family, a little bunch of kittens. Logging back.
Yeah,
I like that. I should do. Do you want to hear Keith's joke?
Could I guess what it is?
Yeah. No, hang on. Wait. Right, what? Who did? Oh, you came up with the same joke yourself. Oh God!
I had a bet that one would come up, but I don't want to ruin it now. So go on.
No, you do it.
Okay, you use catnap.
I should. It only really works if I'd come up with it, doesn't it? It only.
Someone listening that writes Christmas cracker jokes is going to use that.
Yeah, it is a Christmas cracker joke. But anyway, wow, what a time to be alive, Matt. We shall. Of course, Matt gets home using MatNav. It's coming up to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
32 is the time. Here are some questions that need answers. If we found a frozen Homo sapiens from 250,000 years ago, would it be exactly the same as us today, if you could somehow revivify it? Why does a stripy shirt make your head hurt when ironing it? I can't expand on that now because the question's out there. But Daniel has got a stripy shirt, quite thin stripes. When he irons it, his eyes go a bit funny. His head as soon as he stops, he's fine again. What's happening in that space? On the Karakoram highway between Pakistan and China, what happens when the traffic from either country meets, from both countries meets, given that they ordinarily drive on different sides of the road, so they would meet head-on, theoretically. Why do worms come out when it rains? Why are tiny little spots the most painful? Where does the phrase, how do you like them apples, come from? And how do cats find their way home? And this Eleanor's just sent me this story. It's a genuine mystery. Well, so it should be. It's Mystery Hour. But this story here of the cat that disappeared, 800 miles over 2 months. So my theory, as a Sherlock Holmes aficionado, would be that the cat never disappeared at all. Came back with them on the RV, I meant. Thank you, John, not an SUV. I told you I didn't like motoring. So their cat disappeared, they thought, ran into the trees, didn't see him again for 60 days, searched every day, treats, the whole shebang. In the end, we had to leave without him, Suzanne Anguiano told KSBW. That was the hardest day because I felt like I was abandoning him. And then they came back and then received a message from Pet Watch saying that it had been found 800 miles away in Roseville. So it didn't actually find its way home, I don't think. But it did travel 800 miles from Yellowstone. So it's not quite the question, is it? But anyway, how do the cats... So it's not relevant at all, in fact, to the question that we're asking. It didn't find it, just travelled 800 miles. But anyway, that blows up my theory. My theory was that it hid on the RV and then got home and then cleared off for a while and then came back, but it had actually made the journey with them. Bruce is in Swiss Cottage. Bruce, question or answer?
That's a question, sir.
Carry on.
In cricket,
yeah,
why are fast bowlers not getting faster?
I know this, would you believe, because I had this conversation at the Oval just before Christmas.
Okay, what's your theory, sir?
It's not, well, I mean, I suppose it is a theory, but if you're thinking of the heyday of fast bowling, you're thinking of...
No, well, the heyday, basically the fastest ball ever recorded was Shoaib Akhtar.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you've had Brett Lee, Mitchell Starc, and the Great West Indians.
Yeah.
And Dale Steyn.
There are exceptions to my theory in the list, the list of players that you've just mentioned, but not really, because if you think particularly the Great West Indians, they weren't really concerned with anything other than speed, were they?
No, that's not true.
Well, it is true. I mean, the speed was by far the top priority, and at the altar
and bounce and movement.
Yeah, but they're all not movement really, not swing.
Or Malcolm Marshall.
Yeah, well, that's why I said this isn't going to be a completely foolproof theory. But your modern
and also you've got no respite because if you had one fast bowler at one end, the other end there's another one.
Yeah, so spooking the batsman is a large part. There's sort of psychological warfare. But
no helmet.
And yes, I know. But they've got, so that's part of your answer now. They've got armour now, the batsmen, so the fast bowlers aren't quite as intimidating. But I think the answer would be, and I'm not going to take a round of applause. I'm only going to take an answer from a cricketer that we've heard of. So I'm limiting my options on this one. But I think that it is in order to concentrate a little bit more on swing and pitch and just be more accurate.
Well, but they're not more accurate.
Well, they are.
Oh, no, but the point is, if you could bowl 100 miles an hour... Why are you
arguing with me? They are more accurate.
They're not.
They are. What's your theory then?
My theory is that it's physically impossible to bowl at 100 miles an hour. Because they don't. Nobody does.
I thought you were asking why aren't they getting... I thought you were asking why are they getting slower?
slower.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's because they're concentrating on other things.
I think it's... Because in every other sport...
Also, they might be trying to prolong their careers. You know, they might... You think of Jimmy Anderson. If he'd been going absolutely hell for leather, he probably would have had to retire 5 or 10 years
Well,
early.
exactly. Well, if you bump into very old cricketers from the 50s and 60s, their knees and their backs, everything is broken.
Exactly that. I mean, that's partly improved by massage, physiotherapy, changing approaches. But I think the answer would be to reprioritising, so going for consistency and a little bit more swing. Accuracy. But anyway, like I said, I'm not going to take a round of applause, Bruce.
Okay.
I'm going to find out for you. 0345 60 60973. You have to be county level bowler, all right? County level cricketer to answer that question. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bunch of fellas chatting in the like that, like me and Bruce, all right? 12:38 is the time. Claire is in Falmouth. Claire, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
It's the why do worms come out when it rains?
Why do worms doobie-doobie-doo? Carry on.
There are a couple of theories. One is that if they stay in their holes and they fill up with rain, that they will drown.
Yep.
But they reckon the real reason is that it's easier for them to move around on the surface when it's wet, so they can slither and migrate rather than having to stay underground.
Oh, that's quite there. So I like that. That makes perfect sense. Qualifications?
Qualifications, I live in Falmouth, where we have an annual worm charming competition.
Love it.
Yes.
And that makes everyone in Falmouth a worm expert. And it has absolutely nothing to do with being eaten by birds then?
Well, birds will stamp their feet, especially seagulls, to bring them to the surface so that they can eat. They're imitating rain.
That's a very good point. Yeah, so that scuppers my theory completely. So I like that. Jackie, I hope will be satisfied with your answer. And Claire gets the first round of applause of the day.
Thank you very much.
Look at that. Thank you, Claire. And of course, if you are holidaying in that area, don't forget to check out the Falmouth Worm. When is the Falmouth Worm charming competition?
Do you know, I'm not sure when it is this year.
Oh, what sort of ambassador are you? What sort of ambassador are you for the Falmouth Worm charmer? You can't get those gigs that Nigel Farage gets for selling gold bullion and getting 180 grand for 4 hours work if you don't know where it is, Claire.
Absolutely.
Anyway, there we go. Well played. 12:39. Eric Bromley, question, answer.
Answer.
Carry on.
Right. With regard to the driving on the left driving on the right through China and then turning onto the left into Pakistan at the pass.
Yeah.
Me and my wife cycled that route back in '97.
Shut up.
Right. We did 3 months through China, primarily to do that route, the Karakoram Highway from Kashgar to Rawalpindi. So the highlight of the whole trip was obviously the peak.
A bit steep, wasn't it? Getting up that hill?
Pakistan.
Getting up that mountain?
No. Well, the road was built specifically for very, very, very low-powered, heavily laden lorries.
Okay.
That did the trade route, like the Silk Road from thousands of years ago. And so the road was never steep.
Oh.
I mean, it was like a motorway steepness, what you get here in Britain.
Yeah,
there was nothing, not like the French Alps or anything. So it was all very, very gentle, but very, very long. And so we spent 2 weeks going from Kashgar to the border at the top, 4,800 metres. We got our passport stamped at the Chinese when we were leaving the Chinese side. 100 metres further on was the Pakistani side. They looked at our passport, they looked at our visa, stamped that, and we were on our way. There was no sign, well, maybe there were signs in Chinese and Pakistani saying, keep to your side of the road. But it just naturally, we just ended up descending for 2 days down the Indus Valley on the correct side of the road.
So there's not enough traffic for it to be a problem, really.
Back then, no.
That's part of the answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
How many people do you think cycle that route?
we were the last ones that year that I found out, because the snow came in behind us by a matter of days. And then the 2001, nothing happened for about 15 years. After 2001, that whole area closed off to Westerners. The whole northern Pakistan, Afghanistan area, that all closed off. And then it started up again. I've seen people on the internet with their blogs and bits and pieces and photos and stuff. I've seen that maybe 2012 it started up again.
Yeah.
So anywhere between the year we did it, there was a border guard in Pakistan. He was, I think, 18 groups came through.
Okay.
And we were the last ones that year.
18. Is it Ray Liotta?
It was easy.
Is it a Ray Liotta, this one, Keith, do you think? It's a tough one, isn't it? I think it is, because it's, I mean, not least because it then shut for 15 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay, one of these for Eric, I think.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
There you go, Eric. That is because some people will be a bit baffled, possibly including you. That is the accolade I reserve for people whose contribution to the programme demands a level of qualification that is frankly off the charts.
Right. Okay.
So, because literally cycled it. I'm sure that Phil would agree that is beyond our wildest dreams that you'd get someone in that. And I hadn't, of course, clocked the fact that it would have been shut for much of the last sort of 30 or 40 years or so. Well played, Eric. Emily's in Cornwall. Emily, question or answer?
Hello, I have a question, please.
Carry on.
So I have two children.
Yes.
My youngest is 9 months old.
Okay.
And we've always wondered why babies don't seem to reciprocate a yawn or, mirror a yawn when I yawn.
They haven't learned how to yet.
But when you're an adult, it's kind of contagious, isn't it?
It can be, but is it learned behaviour? I mean, there's lots of things. I mean, you're the expert, Emily. It's a long time since either of mine were 9 months old, but there's lots of things they can't do at that age. Ride a bicycle, for example, or make sandwiches.
I know, but they can see, so
Yes.
they can see that I'm yawning. And what changes between being a child? I don't know. Does something not quite connect yet?
I mean, they don't see as clearly as we do. They haven't. I mean, I'll put it on the board, but they haven't. It hasn't kicked in the sort of evolutionary. The reason why yawning is contagious, I think, is because we're conveying to each other that we're safe. If I see you yawn, I know there's nothing coming up. There's nothing coming up behind me to hit me over the head because you're yawning, so I can relax as well. It's all very subconscious and evolutionary.
Okay.
Where babies aren't really there yet. They've got no concept of risk or threat or any of those things, I think.
Okay.
Well, you don't have to accept that answer, but you're definitely correct. That you're definitely correct.
I guess even if I hear someone yawn on the telephone, I will.
Everyone's yawning.
Too.
How many people are yawning now just because we're talking about it? It's remarkable. How old is your oldest?
He's 3.5.
Does he do it?
Do you know, I haven't seen it yet.
So you didn't test this before you rang in?
No, I
Oh,
didn't.
for heaven's sake, Emily, this is just amateurish. This is not good enough. The least you could have done would have been a peer-reviewed, laboratory-conditioned experiment into whether or not the 3.5-year-old yawns contagiously or reciprocally. I like it. Why don't they? Indeed, why do they when they're older? Why do we when we're older? It's on the board. It's a bit late in the day, but we're very short of answers this week. Let's try and get Emily's. 12:45 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Questions in need of answers. It's a bit late now. I better just crack on. I like this. Two things that made me chuckle. One, I don't think was necessarily supposed. Yeah, of course it was. Benny being in touch said, "Please thank Emily for just making me yawn with an impacted wisdom tooth abscess. I had an impacted wisdom tooth. My God, that hurt. Why are you shaking your head like that, Keith? Do you get weird about toothache? Does it? Yeah, I know what you mean. And this deliberately, I thought was funny from Kevin. Babies don't yawn because they can't be bothered, James. Lazy kids these days, they don't know they're born. Alan's in Chesterfield. Alan, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Alan.
How do they like them apples?
Yes.
I think you're right with the grenades.
Yeah, me too.
The Mark II grenade that they used in the trenches was like a tortoise shell outer casing that blasted into shrapnel.
Yeah.
And they looked like pineapples. But I think there's another part of it was they also mortars, what they called them toffee apples.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So
you know, they had the stick coming out with the ordnance on the end. And I think because they were nicknamed pineapples and toffee apples, how do you like them apples is what they shout when they were thrown at someone.
I think I've got qualifications?
Well, do you remember about a few weeks ago there was a question on why is it called a cup of joe?
Yes.
And my qualification was that about 45 years ago I used to read a lot of comics like Action and Eagle and Commando.
It's the same qualification.
It's exactly the same. I'm absolutely certain I read it in an action strip where somebody threw a grenade out from a trench and shouted,
How do you like them
apples?
Fritz, for you, for you, Fritz, the war is over. I used to love those comics. They were fantastic.
That's my only qualification.
That's all
I've
you
got
need,
no
Alan.
actual knowledge.
It's all you need. That is knowledge. That is knowledge. It's just comic-based knowledge is the best kind of knowledge. Have a round of applause on me. Great work.
Thank you very much.
Love it. Mark's in Cambridge. Mark, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
Right, bear with me. I'm very nervous and very excited to,
It's only
to
me.
be on here.
Carry on. Good man.
You had the question about the chap who was getting headaches when he's ironing his stripy shirt.
Yes.
So I'm taking a bit of a pun, but something this could be is something called visual vertigo.
Oh, yeah.
So what this boils down to essentially is there's three ways that you balance as a human being, which is the vision that comes into your eyes. You've got an inner ear system called your vestibular system that helps you know where upright is, and the kind of sensation and pressure and feeling in your feet.
Okay.
And there's some people who have some deficits in their vestibular system for a variety of reasons. They might have had infections, or they might just have a genetic kind of weakness there. And they'll tend to become more dominant with their visual system.
Okay.
In terms of how they're organising their balances and functioning during the day, a lot of work and information is going in through their eyes. And then often these people will report they might be migraine sufferers or have episodes of dizziness or loss of balance when they're facing kind of complex visual information, such as stripy shirts or like the aisles down a supermarket.
I wonder, I mean, we didn't establish whether or not he ever got similar whether Daniel ever got similar feelings in similar circumstances, but that makes it about the eyes rather than about the shirt, really, doesn't it? So it's not strobing, because then it would happen to everybody in a similar situation in the way that a television camera turns could he have astigmatism?
That would be out of my...
What are your qualifications?
I'm a neurological physiotherapist with a specialism in vestibular system. So we see this quite a lot, where it's not someone's eyes that are the problem, it's their vestibular system, it's their inner ear that's not doing its job. So their eyes are doing too much work.
It made his head go funny rather than his eyes go funny. I'm going to give you a round of applause, Mark.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Life ambition achieved.
Oh, well, that's it. Ticket, that bucket list. 12:53 is the time. Stefan's in Broadstairs. Stefan, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
To the yawning question.
Oh, yes.
So, it's between the ages of sort of 4 and 5. Once children start
I just need to apologise, sorry. I got that bit wrong, didn't I? I did a German accent when I was saying, for you, Fritz, the war is over. Which it wouldn't be a German saying that, would it? Because Fritz is the name that the Commando comics often used for Nazi soldiers. So it should have been an English accent, or if I was going to do the German accent, thank you to Rotter for pointing this out. I should have said for you, Tommy, the war is over. That would. I'm glad we've cleared that up. Carry on with the yawning, Stefan. Literally,
you didn't give us an accent warning that time, James.
You're absolutely right. I'm slipping. I only invented that today, and you're already picking me up on it. Round of applause! Round of applause for Stefan. That's extraordinary. Well played. Carry on.
So it's around the ages of 4 or 5 once children start to recognise that they get the ability to recognise how other people are feeling.
Oh yeah. Oh, that would be it. Of course. So it's like empathy.
Yes.
Emotion. Round qualifications.
Listening to this show, you've had this question before.
I had a feeling you might say that. Round of applause for Stefan. Max is in Doncaster. Max, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on, Max.
So it's to the humans question and early humans.
Yes.
So it's a bit of it depends on how close you want to be. 250,000 years is a bit too far for it to be. 10,000 years is definitely close enough, though.
Okay.
We were farming and doing human activities.
But it's not so much the behaviour as the capacity for behaviour. So, no, but it's the same thing.
The brain hasn't grown
exactly.
or changed in 10,000 years. Evolution doesn't really work on such short time periods. But about 100,000 years ago, you had the Homo erectus, and so they would have definitely been very different. They would have had much smaller brains and would be a lot hairier than modern humans.
So, I mean, the simple answer is no to the question of whether Homo sapiens would be indistinguishable from ours. Homo sapien,
but
no.
The problem is,
the
problem if you look at your father and then your father's father and keep on going, every single time the father looks like the son.
Yeah.
But then if you do it this a million times, you end up with a fish at the end.
Yeah.
And so, at what point did it stop becoming a human?
Do you know, it's a long time. It's a long time since I had conversations like this, Max.
Yeah, I quite enjoy it. I'm a fan of Richard Dawkins.
And then I wasn't thinking about Richard Dawkins, although I was thinking about my university days, which is when I studied Richard Dawkins. So if you go back, what? My dad was a fit, what?
No,
How
so
many
if
greats would you need to find a fish, man?
It would probably be about 500 million years. So
a fish.
Yeah,
I'm really hungry.
It would be a long time, but you would eat your great so and so grandparent if you found him.
Do you think the 24-hour garage is still open?
What?
What are your qualifications, Max?
I read a lot of Richard Dawkins the book Yuval Noah Harari.
Of course, indeed. Sapiens, called Sapiens itself. Great work. And apologies for my pathetic jokes, which quite rightly went over your head. Owen is in Western Superman. Owen, question or answer?
It's an answer. Student inquiry.
Carry on. It's all right. It's lovely today. We're going through the sort of archives of things I dreamt up years ago and then largely forget about. But the steward's inquiry is a hardy perennial. What have you got?
It's the stripy shirt, feeling ill, headaches guy.
Yeah.
Because I suffer from it myself, I have hyper photosensitivity. So, like the kind of people that, they warn about flashing lights and things like that, can have seizures and whatnot.
Of course.
And a sort of byproduct of that is that certain patterns, especially straight lines, can make me feel extremely ill, and it's not good.
Wouldn't Daniel have noticed this before he got this shirt if it was a condition like yours?
It depends how sensitive he is, I guess.
Do you think it's possible that he's got a mild case of it and it's only been triggered by this one shirt?
That really wouldn't surprise me.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Qualifications, you have it.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Round of applause for Owen. I like it. Can I squeeze in one more? Andy's in Colchester. Andy, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
So the cricket question about why fast bowlers aren't getting faster.
Are you county level player?
I'm not, unfortunately, but I did have a chat with someone very important to this story.
Who?
Nick Knight, the batsman who faced Shoaib Akhtar's 100-mile-an-hour delivery.
Are you well known in another field, Andy?
No.
Okay. I thought you might be someone else for a minute. Carry on with your answer.
No, anyway, listen, I wish I was that good a cricketer.
Yes.
Right, so I think, like any technology, the speed gun technology is getting better because, based on this conversation I had with Nick Knight, his father-in-law lived in a village where my parents lived, and I met Nick Knight in a pub not long after that happened.
Right.
And I asked him what it was like, and he said to me, the funny thing is, the 100 mile an hour went up on the speed gun, and everyone went, ooh.
Yeah.
But he said that wasn't even the fastest ball that he bowled in that spell.
So your theory is it's speed gun technology that's improved as opposed to fast bowlers that have slowed?
Yes.
I can't accept that.
Just look at Mark Wood. He's like 97, 98 mile an hour. But I reckon...
No, I don't think this is true.
Well, it's like any technology, isn't it?
No, I mean, it's feasible. I can't take it, Andy.
But I'm going back to Nick Knight telling me to my face that 100-mile-an-hour ball wasn't even the quickest one he faced that day.
No, I believe you, Matt. I don't dispute your encounter with Nick Knight. I just don't. I think it's widely accepted in cricketing circles that fast bowlers aren't as fast as they used to be.
Well, that might be a different thing entirely due to sort of a...
What do you mean a different thing from your entirely unconnected anecdote about meeting Nick Knight?
Because bowlers have a more all-round fitness these days.
Well, that's why I think it's that. I don't think it's speed gun technology. The favourite this week was Phil in Beckenham, who asked about the... It was very nearly Eric who answered the Karakoram Highway question. Have you ever been to the Karakoram Highway, Matt?
I have not, I'm afraid, no.
Really?
I know. Can you believe it?
Plummeted in my estimate. If anyone had been to the Karakoram Highway...
I've been to a restaurant called the Karakoram Highway.
Oh, that's the next best thing. That is it from me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including my new James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show. I know, let joy be unconfined. Best 60 minutes, best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Sawbrook with you at 4, but if you're confused by the voice in the background, you should know Sheila Fogarty is indisposed. Who is here? It is Matt Fry.
James O'Brien on LBC.